The boy's eyelids were tightly closed. A moment later, his purple eyes opened slightly. It seemed as if infinity was visible in them. There was absolute nothingness around him. He could not remember where he was or who he was. There was a complete absence of thoughts and memories in my head. My head was splitting. He tried to come to his senses. Everything was like a fog. His hands were shackled. He needed to understand what this place was. However, there was nothing around, so he didn't know which way to go. He didn't know how much time had passed since he woke up. However, all this time he wandered through space. Of course, he lost track of time. There was a feeling that there was simply no such concept as time in this place. Suddenly, his attention shifted to something ahead. A figure was visible in the distance. He started running. Finally, after so much time, he was not alone in this place. Suddenly, he stopped and opened his mouth in surprise. He didn't understand what was happening. A girl's corpse appeared before him. He couldn't believe his eyes. The space around him went dark. Disorientation in space did not allow him to understand what was happening. He was scared. Tears were rolling down his cheeks. He couldn't pull himself together. The guy took a deep breath, hoping that it would help him. It was as if something had changed inside him. Suddenly, someone's hand fell on his shoulder. At that very second, he turned around. In front of him was a blue-eyed brunette with a ponytail. He asked the main character what he was doing here and why there was a corpse lying in front of him. The guy replied that he himself didn't understand what was going on. The brunette extended his hand in greeting and said that her chest was open. You can't do that with your bare hands, so there must have been a weapon somewhere. The protagonist shook his hand. Then he tried to get up from his knees. The guy helped the main character up and shared with him that he couldn't remember how he ended up in this place. The shackles fell from the protagonist's hands. But he was curious how the brunette managed to do it. The protagonist exhaled, but a sign appeared in front of him. It said that the participants of the competition had been determined. 2 pieces of paper appeared in the air on which the names and ages of the participants were written. The brunette screamed, and the main character only managed to grab the sheet of paper when shackles appeared on his hands again. He wondered if there was any information there that could help him understand where they were and what to do next. The name written on the piece of paper was Rayan Azura. She was almost 80 years old, and her mission was to find her sister. The brunette turned out to be 35 years old. It turned out that he had a family and children, and his name was Tengen Chu. Tengen screamed that he didn't remember anything. A notice appeared in front of them that they would be provided with weapons. Rayan's entire neck was suddenly covered in lightning sensors, and his hands began to shine. The next moment, a weapon appeared in his hands. The guys were tasked with killing their opponent in 5 minutes. The one who wins will become a god. If they don't make it in time, the suit will emit electricity that will kill them. A moment later, the game greeted them and informed them that they would now fight for the status of a god. They had no choice. The first round began. Rayan couldn't understand why they needed to fight. A timer appeared in front of him. These names and biographies could be lies. The brunette said that it was possible that it was a joke. Tengen shouted that no one would erase someone's memory just to make a joke. The protagonist understood that he had to survive at any cost. Then he said that even despite the hell they had fallen into, he was no more than a stranger to him. Everything was decided. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Then he opened them again. Tengen rushed towards him. The only option left was to kill him. All that remained was to understand the opponent's tactics. Moreover, his body moved easily in space. Tengen dealt another blow to Rayan. The guy tensed up. The brunette stopped, needing a few seconds to realize how badly he had wounded his enemy. He didn't understand how it all came to this. Then he threw a weapon at him. Although initially, he did not want to harm anyone. The fight was fierce. Rayan tried his best to dodge the blow. His enemy was very good at wielding weapons. Besides, he moved too confidently. It looks like this blow is unstoppable. All he could do was duck and dodge another dagger. Rayan fell to the floor, and blood finally appeared. Tengen growled menacingly. It seemed like he couldn't stop, and he plunged the weapon into the guy. The main character had nowhere to go. He just laughed at the hopelessness of the situation. However, tears still flowed down my cheeks. If only he could free his hands, he would have had a chance to win. Although he wanted to live much more than to win. Suddenly, a dagger pierced his chest. He fell on his back, blood spurting out. Tengen seems to have achieved his goal. The protagonist could no longer stand up. In this case, only one can survive. Rayan grabbed the handle and tried to pull the weapon out of his chest. How could he screw up like that and let himself get hurt? Tengen swung at him again. The order to kill was heard in the air. The brunette thrust his sword into the ground with such force that cracks appeared on the floor. He was full of rage. What he didn't expect was that Rayan would be able to do anything. At this time, the red-haired guy, gritting his teeth in pain, was already rushing towards him. He thrust the dagger into his neck with ease and simplicity. He no longer wanted to doubt that someone else's life was more important than his. Tengen tried to pull the dagger out of his neck. However, Rayan applied a chokehold, wrapping a chain around his neck and binding his hands. He had to survive at any cost. Tengen began to beg for mercy and talk about his family. Rayan had no intention of letting him go. On the contrary, He pressed it down with his feet with all his might. He was overcome with anger. He used the chain again and literally broke his neck. It looked like victory was his. Rayan couldn't believe he had just killed a man. However, he felt nothing at all. The guy just reached into Tengen's pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. He sat down next to the body and tried to pull the dagger out of his body. His goal now was different, and he did what he had to do. Now he needed to know what to do next. Moreover, he had an unbearable desire to find and destroy those who had locked him in this place. At that moment, the timer went off, counting down the last 5 seconds until the end of the round. A blinding white light appeared in front of him. The voice announced his name and serial number, and he voiced his new role, God. The young man could not believe that he had achieved the status of a god. This is how he became a Superman. The space was illuminated by light, and a creature he had never met before appeared before him. He bowed before him. The creature asked about his well-being. Rayan didn't take his eyes off him. The creature repeated the question again. Images of what he had to endure appeared in the guy's head. It turned out that in order to save himself, he had to kill. A shudder ran through the guy's body. The creature looked at him carefully and waited. Suddenly, the main character screamed that he finally felt something. The creature smiled as the participant realized who he was. The protagonist wanted to know the truth. The creature in front of him answered that he created this space specifically for players. In this dimension, there were 2 million souls. The guy thought that it was not in vain that they were forced to fight duels. The young man shouted that he did not understand why he was there. The creature replied that the participant had asked a perfectly correct question. There was only one place for all these souls, in his game, and they were all united by one desire. Rayan was unhappy. It seemed like he couldn't just get out of this place. Suddenly, he felt unwell. His throat tightened as if he had lost the power of speech. The creator ordered him not to object. His hand pointed downwards. Black smoke began to thicken around him. The guy's body didn't obey. He could not resist and fell before him. The creator explained that everything around is his creation. In exchange, he would allow whoever could win this game to make a wish. Among so many players, only one could receive such a gift. These were the rules of his game. The creator was clearly intoxicated by his unlimited power. Rayan did not understand why he needed such a cruel game. The creator replied that he had started all this just for fun. The guy wanted to know if there was anyone else. The entity replied that he would find out everything, but in time. This was the plan from the very beginning. First of all, he just needed to survive. Rayan was upset. A second later, the chain on his hands broke. This is where his adventure as someone who tried to become a god began. He had no idea what would happen next. The hero found himself in a place where other players were gathering. They also paid attention to the newcomer. Another guy in a mask also cast a cold glance in his direction. Nearby, Rayan saw a child. They all had to kill someone to get to this place. There was a door in front of them that said they would need a partner to get to the second level. He desperately needed to beat this game, just like everyone else. Of course, in such a place there is no room for the weak. He had to make them think twice. Immediately, he remembered the guy he killed. A new creature appeared before him, one he had never seen before. However, he didn't know what awaited them in this round. The creature greeted him. It asked if he was ready for the second round. The guy was surprised that this entity, which looked more like a mannequin, knew his language. The mannequin introduced himself as a master named Yora. He was an assistant. The guy became nervous. He didn't understand where they were. 3 guys said that they had already tried to find out at least something. The blonde guy asked the main character how he ended up there. Rayan felt uneasy. Most likely, God told them all the same thing. The guy extended his hand and introduced himself. His name was Euron. He said he would be glad if they went through this together. Rayan was overcome with anxiety. He suddenly felt ill. He fell to his knees and felt pain. The pain was as if he had been hit in the chest, but there was no injury. Euron smiled and asked the protagonist's name. Then he began to laugh loudly and asked sarcastically what was wrong with him. Rayan gritted his teeth. He immediately realized that this was his doing. Euron smiled again and said that only the strongest would survive. Suddenly, a guy in a robe approached them and shouted at them to stop. Damage started screaming. He hadn't even raised his hand yet. The main character could not recover from the unpleasant sensations. The guy in the robe and mask told them to be quiet. He said that the bandits were to blame for everything. Then he used force. A sword materialized in his hands. The main character had never seen such a trick before. The rest wanted the assistant to intervene in what was happening. He doesn't need problems. The guy in the mask looked scary. Then he turned to Rayan and confronted him with the fact that they were now partners in the round. He didn't understand what he had done to deserve such a partner. Besides, he had no magical abilities. However, Rayan suspected that the guy had chosen him for a reason. The main character introduced himself. The guy decided that if he faced someone strong, he would be able to survive the next round. The guy in the mask introduced himself. His name is Takeda Shinigami. Takeda said that in the next round they will act together no matter what happens. Rayan turned to the master. He wanted to have at least some information. There were no instructions for the second round until they left the room. Takeda didn't want to waste a minute. The protagonist decided that it was worth taking a closer look at his partner. The guy was already standing at the door and was ready for the next test. Darkness appeared before them. Rayan was a little scared. The unknown did not bode well. His partner entered first. With each step he took, a path of stone appeared in space. This surprised him very much. He had never been in such a dimension before. From behind, he heard the blonde man's voice, promising him that they would definitely see each other again. The main character didn't pay any attention to this. However, without turning to them, he shouted that he would do everything to prevent this from happening. And he rushed to run to his partner. He called out to Shinigami. He wanted to understand why, out of all those present, he was chosen. He replied that it was all in the look. It was about the eyes of the creator himself. This is what made him choose as an ally. Everyone in this room is a stranger who has hidden their abilities. In God's game, they are all, first and foremost, rivals. Besides, it seemed to him that, in this situation, he would be best able to confide in someone he did not know. The main character was flattered that out of everyone, he chose him first. If it is useless or lets him down, he will get rid of it. Rayan noted that such a person would not stand on ceremony. They both didn't want to waste time. You will have to adapt to any conditions or face death. A bright light that illuminated the space appeared out of nowhere. It prevented the main character from examining the place. Shinigami walked forward. The protagonist was a little disoriented, but followed him despite everything. His attention shifted and he saw something interesting ahead. Two people appeared in front of them, an old man and a young busty blonde. The guys were surprised. They had never met such older players before. Shinigami and Rayan stood there, not understanding what to do or how to react next. The blonde guy decided to discuss with his partner who would be their first victim. The main character lowered his head. The old man spoke first. He desperately wanted to know what awaited them in this round. The guy just looked at them intently, assessing their fighting abilities. The old man was interested in their names and who they were. Shinigami ordered the protagonist not to engage in conversation with him. The protagonist thought that the more distanced they were from their enemies, the easier it would be for them to destroy them. The old man introduced himself. It turned out that his name was Jurin, and the striking blonde in glasses turned out to be a girl named Sarah. Suddenly, a voice pierced the space, announcing the start of the second round. It was the master. This time he was dressed up and looked very formal. It was stupid to think that they would be allowed to start the game without being briefed. The main character did not immediately recognize Master Eru. Perhaps it was in the bag. The master, holding the ball in his hands, began to explain the rules. It turned out that whoever had the ball would be able to earn a point for his team, and this would happen every second. This round will last for about 15 minutes. The team that can score the most points will be declared the winner. The rest will simply be removed from the game. Era allowed them to use whatever they wanted in an attempt to take possession of the ball and kill. The game will also stop if the ball falls outside the platform. The old man wanted to know what the master meant. It turned out that all four would simply die. Sarah immediately decided to activate one of her abilities. As expected from the cruel god who ran this show, the rules were too strict. A weapon appeared in the girl's hands. Rayan became nervous that he didn't have a weapon, and besides, he had no idea how to summon one, which meant the fight was initially unequal. He explained that when the creator appeared, he was not a man of many words. If God decided to hide some rules of the game from him, then it was for a reason. Era decided that he had no right to interfere in the affairs and plans of the creator himself. The round was about to begin. Jurin and Sarah were ready to fight them. The ball immediately flew into the old man's face. He almost caught it. The master watched everything from the air, and after a few seconds sarcastically noted that the ball might be heavier for people. Rayan was unhappy that he had no advantages. Shengen decided that the first thing to do was to kill the old man. The old man looked at the boy rushing towards him in fear. The man held the ball tightly in his hands. Sarah jumped out in front of him and they clashed in a fight. She wielded the weapon confidently. Shengen shouted at her to get out of the way. Sarah said she hated arrogant people who were too confident in themselves, so she wouldn't give him a break. Being the oldest Jurin, in their opinion, was the weakest, and it would not be easy for such a warrior to hold a heavy ball and fight at the same time. Rayan realized that in this situation, the partner must protect the sword's keeper, simply for the sake of survival. Era looked at all this thoughtfully. The sight didn't impress him yet. The main character called out to the old man. The guy wanted to intercept the ball. The protagonist grabbed the weapon. It looked like the old man was about to die. And then they will know for sure who he is. The old man saw that the main character was preparing to attack him. The man was surprised that the guy was so brave. He took aim at the enemy, and was ready to shoot him. His weapon was built into his cane. Rayan glanced at Sarah but felt some movement behind him. The old man apologized, but he didn't let go of the ball. Immediately, he released a cloud of fire from his cane and thought that he needed to win this game. Moreover, the main character still couldn't escape the attack. His eyes lit up with magical energy. The old man said that this path is not for everyone. The main character understood that he could not simply sacrifice his hand. He immediately realized that he needed to do the same as in the first round, when he fought with Tengen. He could not doubt, as last time. Now he needed to take further action. Rayan used the power of the Fire Fist. The hand flew straight into the old man's jaw. The blow was so strong that the man was thrown to the side. Of course, after this, it would be difficult to maintain consciousness. Schengen watched the protagonist's actions closely until he understood what to do in this situation. Master Era thought about it, and now he was quite interested. The protagonist looked at the crazy old man. He had nothing more to say. He was confused by the fact that he could no longer feel his wrist. The decision remained on what to do next: crush his skull or deal with him with bare hands. Killing this unarmed stranger couldn't be the only way to win. He needed a few seconds to figure out what to do with the ball. The main character was very surprised. He stood still and continued to hold the ball in his hands, completely unaware of what awaited him next. The old man still couldn't come to his senses. He looked at his hand and realized that the changes that had happened to his body were irreversible. Schengen shouted at him to just finish what he started. The protagonist stood and stared at the old man. He had to make a decision that would cost the man his life. This was precisely the path he had to choose. Suddenly, a weapon plunged into the body. The guy didn't immediately realize what had happened. His gaze turned to the side. Literally before his eyes, in a split second, his partner was pierced through like a piece of meat. All he managed to do was just shout his name. Sarah shouted that she didn't doubt for a second that anyone's life was more important than hers. Rayan immediately felt a strange surge of strength. The girl moved from her place, and she headed towards him, ready to tear him apart with her bare hands. The guy was sweating a little. Sarah tried to hit the protagonist, but he managed to dodge. Rayan was surprised that she was so fast. The old man understood that he could escape and grabbed him tightly by the leg. The young man instantly became angry. They tried to grab him. Then came a blow to the jaw. Sarah was still able to attack him. Without waiting for the protagonist's reaction, she swung again. This time, she attacked him even faster. Rayan couldn't stay on his feet. Blood splattered in all directions. He didn't want to die. He didn't lose consciousness, but he needed a little time to come up with a new fighting tactic. Sarah was next to him in a moment. The guy realized that she couldn't just get the opportunity to move so quickly. There was definitely a catch. Most likely, she also had abilities. The girl hit the main character in the chest. Blood splattered in all directions again, and the guy flew even further than last time. It seemed impossible to survive after this. Master Era also thought about the progress of the round. He was still watching what was happening from above. A golden glow appeared around the girl. She looked terrifying. The protagonist lay on the ground and thought that another such blow could cost him his life. Besides, even after death, nothing good awaited him. He remembered how it all began, and about the mission in which he must find his sister. At that moment, even his own name seemed strange to him. The hero didn't remember anything. His partner was lying nearby. He had not come to his senses. It seemed to him that everything was completely meaningless. Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of him, and he had a request. He wanted his ball back. Rayan didn't know what to answer. Schengen knew he had to do something. He couldn't pull the spear out of himself, but gathering all his strength into a fist, he tried to get up. Nevertheless, he grabbed the spear, and if he was lucky, it would help him in the further battle for his life and the ball. Having gathered his strength, he finally pulled the weapon out of himself, without making a sound. The pain was hellish, so much so that he lost control of himself. A new energy appeared inside him that was previously unfamiliar to him. Sarah approached the protagonist and said that she could help. A voice came from above. Master Era wanted to know why the protagonist was still continuing the battle, and what his life was ultimately for. Rayan replied that he wanted to find a reason to live. The master said that this was a stupid wish, especially if you don't know what you might lose. Moreover, his thirst for truth did not give him any peace. He didn't know how she was going to stop the pain. He was interested in seeing Sarah's abilities. The girl moved forward, but the old man tried to stop her. He took a step, and hung in the air. He didn't plan to give the ball away just like that. Someone stopped him from falling into the abyss. He was very surprised. Sarah held him tightly by the leg of his trousers, and swore that he would kill everyone if the ball fell over the edge of the platform. The old man also joined in his rescue and grabbed the girl around the waist, preventing her from falling after him, because the ball was heavy. Soon, they managed to pull him out of the abyss. Sarah screamed, which she would have expressed in a different tone, but apparently not this time. Something flew past her. She turned around and couldn't believe her eyes. Rayan couldn't hold back his tears. Schengen pierced the old man through and through. Sarah stood rooted to the spot as the tragedy unfolded before her eyes. The old man began to groan heavily, and the guy continued to attack him. Then he said that they couldn't even kill him in a humane manner. The protagonist distracted Sarah by jumping towards the platform. This was the only chance to distract them. At this point, the battle turned. The old man fell to his knees, hoping that everything would go quickly and painlessly. He felt uneasy. A feeling of fear overwhelmed him. In the end, was there any point in starting a fight if everything could end with one jump with the ball into the unknown? The old man said that he was afraid of death ultimately. All people experience fear in the face of death. Rayan didn't take his eyes off him. The man replied that deep in his mind there was something he wanted to know, but he had the feeling that he could not reach it. The guy objected. An image of the guy he had mercilessly killed in the first round appeared in his mind. Their dialogue was interrupted by Shenigan, who attacked Sarah. Tears streamed down the old man's cheeks. He understood that this was the end. He sat peacefully on the ground and waited for the end. Rayan stood silently. He understood what it was like to be on the brink of death. As the pool of blood beneath the old man grew, his strength began to leave him. Master Era reported that he had a few minutes left. All this time, the ball was with the main character. He will not allow Sarah to score points for her team. Shenigan said that they were finished. Sarah started screaming. She was furious and didn't know what to do. The blonde said that killing himself, in this situation, would have been a more sensible decision. The girl clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. There was nowhere to retreat. The guy was holding a weapon in his hands. The old man almost lost consciousness. His body did not move. The partner said that they still had 3 whole minutes. The protagonist's partner stopped, wondering what would happen next. He felt uneasy for a second. The girl decided that it would be easier to kill them both. Rayan was curious about where she got such abilities. At first, he hoped that the girl would move in space. Then he would be able to come up with a way to defeat her. However, he noticed the wind that followed her as soon as she attacked. When the girl hit him, he felt a surge. She attacked the main character again, but the guy was able to dodge. Sarah asked him to keep quiet. The boy realized that this was similar to what Jurin had done. A golden glow appeared around the girl again. She quickly attacked the protagonist. He tried to hold the ball tightly in his hands. Sarah didn't give up. However, he was unable to stay on his feet. The next moment, a tip was aimed at the guy. He understood that there was nowhere to hide. The weapon was already rushing towards him at incredible speed. It was at that very moment that Shinigan called out to his partner. The protagonist felt the girl's power again. Sarah thrust the weapon into the ground. Master Era thought. At that moment, the main character blocked the attack with his sword. However, a loud crunch of bones was heard. The main character coughed up blood. The girl was delighted that he figured out how to defend himself. The protagonist replied that he would be surprised if God created a less durable ball. The partner immediately came to the guy's aid. He asked the protagonist if he could stand up. The protagonist decided that she controlled the wind and could either speed up or strengthen herself. The girl realized that all this time Master Era had been watching everything. The master asked her why she was doing all this. The protagonist and his partner stood and looked at her. The girl began to cry and said that she didn't want to die. Rayan remembered everyone he killed. Shinigan shouted that the round would not end just like that. Era only smiled slightly. Besides, they had 1 minute to spare. Sarah couldn't calm down. Jurin still hadn't moved. She had to activate the power again. The girl said that this was not at all what she wanted. Era said that when a person is forced to stand between life and death, he has absolutely no desire to choose. Hopelessness and the desire to live lead a person to new heights. Rayan noted that this time she would be faster and stronger. The partner realized that she would not give up so easily. The girl was determined. The timer was at the 50-second mark. The players were in this place for the same amount of time. The protagonist did not expect Sarah to use all her power. Besides, they only had a minute for everything. All that was left was to endure this time. Sarah attacked the main character. The speed of her blow was terrifying. Rayan flew to the side. A weapon appeared in her hands. This time there was no mercy. A second later, the spear was already flying towards the main character. It seemed as if the weapon was flying at such a speed that it was ready to catch up with the protagonist right in mid-flight. Rayan collapsed to the ground. The weapon caught up with him and pierced him. The guy could only scream in pain. Blood splattered in all directions. The girl snapped and took a few steps forward. The young man cursed silently. Sarah possessed enormous power. She pressed the guy with her foot and pulled out the spear. Rayan grunted in pain again. It looks like his end is near. The girl raised her spear over him. However, the tip stuck next to him. Sarah herself did not understand how it happened. Suddenly, the girl felt a sharp pain, and a fountain of blood spurted in all directions. Her hand was cut off. She screamed in horror and unbearable pain. Rayan didn't immediately realize what was happening. The girl turned around. Shenigan stood behind her and said that it was her own fault. There's no way he can let his round partner get killed. She was outraged that he knew how to use his power. He didn't want to show off his skills in front of everyone. Sarah was furious, and she jumped up from her place. She was ready to destroy him at that very moment. Rayan grabbed his shoulder. He miraculously managed to stay alive. But now his partner's life was at stake. Shenigan was ready for battle. A lava weapon appeared in his hands. A wave of fire cut through space. With the first swing of his sword, he managed to hit the girl. She didn't have time to put up a defense or intercept the attack. She was knocked off her feet by a firebird that Shenigan had released. After the protagonist killed his first victim, he decided to be strong. However, after he saw the strength of the other participants, he was no longer so confident that he would be able to reach the end of the game. Shenigan waited for a response. In this place, anyone could show their dark side. In any case, Up until this moment, he had never seen anyone who could maintain human form in such a battle. Blood spread across the arena. Sarah screamed that the pain was unbearable. The girl looked up and her executioner appeared before her. Shenigan pointed his sword at her neck. She looked at him with fear, realizing that in a few seconds she would lose her life. She was overcome with hysterics. She didn't want to die in this damn game. She started screaming, hoping that it would change something. It took Shenigan 15 seconds to determine her fate. Sarah turned to the protagonist and said that it was unfair. A person like Rayan did not deserve to stay alive after what he had done. The guy was silent. All he could do was hold his wounded shoulder. The girl bowed her head before her executioner. Rayan's partner took a decisive step forward. There were 10 seconds left before the peculiar execution. The girl continued to cry. Shenigan raised his sword over the girl. The main character looked at them without taking his eyes off them. A sharp swing, a whistle of the sword, and Sarah's head fell from her shoulders. While Rayan was digesting the picture that happened before him, an unusual vision came to him. The image of a boy appeared before him. A clearing appeared around them. The boy approached the main character and said that he would like to show him what his mother gave him. The boy was surprised. He hadn't heard from his mother for too long. A girl ran out of the bushes and said that she now had a cross. She said that now, thanks to God, they would have a good harvest, despite the fact that God creates cataclysms. For a moment, the guy was speechless. The boy began to cry. He could not believe that God could be so evil. The girl said that the missionary gave the necklace to her and her mother. The boy hugged his little sister and said that he also wanted something as a gift from God. Rayan heard the girl's name. Her name was Ichika. She might even have been able to convince the mother to share with the boy. She patted the boy on the head and said she was hungry. The main character felt something. The boy and his sister moved on. Rayan got angry. He couldn't take his eyes off them. The girl turned around sharply and assumed a defensive stance. The main character couldn't hold back. He wanted to cry. The girl asked menacingly who he was, and the little boy behind her was slightly frightened. Suddenly, Rayan heard a strange sound that resembled a crunch. The protagonist did not understand how it happened. The memory dissipated like fog. Only the pieces of glass floating in the air were proof that he had not imagined it. The main character has never felt anything like this before. Master Era appeared before him and addressed the players by name. Shenigan did not raise his head. Rayan immediately realized that this was his doing. Era grinned contentedly. After that, he handed the guy a cross and said that this was a special thing. This is not just a piece of metal. It is the meaning of life. The boy bowed his head before him and realized that this could become his will to live and win in this game. Of course, he didn't recognize the girl with the cross. What struck him most was the feeling he got when he saw his little sister. A red-haired knight appeared in front of the guy and offered him a deal. Rayan was surprised that judges could make deals with them. The guy thought about it. The judge replied that God never chooses people just like that. And besides, the champion receives a second power that will be added to his status as a god. A second sacred power would make him much stronger. He will have more than just the status of a god. This is an opportunity to get two powers at once. The judge said that there was never such a thing as honesty in this universe. In this endless game, the winner will stand on two pillars at the same time. The one who wins the favor of the gods will gain the most power in the arena. After all, the master is able to control his gift. Shenigan was able to concentrate and control the flames. Sarah used her ability to speed up at the same time. These fighters skillfully controlled their forces. Rayan didn't know what to do in this case. A winner must be willing to do anything. The judge wanted to know what he was capable of. The guy smiled. However, the judge said that her words were worth nothing. She was only interested in the result. Besides, there could have been many more murders. The girl decided to tell much more about his sister. Rayan wanted to know why she was so kind. The girl replied that it was too early to choose champions. The sooner she invested, the more she would get. He would have to win. The judge returned to her chair. He involuntarily remembered his first victim. If he can't win, then in the 5th round he will be his champion. The hero was ready to do this. The judge replied that she would keep an eye on him and ordered him to get out of her courtroom. All that remained was to win him over. However, it was interesting to see how many people he could kill. The guy was ready for a fight. A fair-haired girl appeared in front of him. She hurried away, but it seemed to him that it would be more logical to catch up with her. Something was holding the guy back. His instincts became heightened. The guy followed her. However, something stopped him. The girl pointed a gun at him, which he didn't expect at all. She wanted to understand why he was pursuing her. The girl kept the gun pointed at him. There was no one around. She could have shot him. The guy closed his eyes. He wanted to remain calm, no matter what. He replied that he saw her destroy another participant. The hero shared with her his desire to see her on the team. The blue-eyed blonde asked who he meant. The girl thought. Then she said that he looked like a pervert, and she doubted that he would be of any use. Rayan replied that he wanted to be of service and followed her. She looked even more attractive from behind. Having passed the corridor, they entered the hall. They found themselves in an arena where some were already training. The hero didn't understand what they were doing there. She said that they just needed to pass the test. The girl was sure that the participant standing in front of her was the one who killed her partner in the last round. A huge muscular man stood in the company of 2 other men. She ordered him to destroy him, and then she would definitely belong to him. Rayan was curious what she meant. He was completely taken aback. The moment this huge brute appeared in front of him, he assumed that God kills the losers. He was curious about her name. However, she answered a question with a question. She smiled. The girl set a condition she would tell him her name only if he defeated this freak. The blonde looked at him slyly and with interest. She doubted that the participants could die here. God would not want all his players to die at once. If so, this was his chance to test it against a strong opponent. He remembered that he couldn't rely on someone forever. He needed to become stronger. This time, he was determined. The green-haired girl looked at him. The 3 girls watched everything that was happening with particular interest. The main thing is that at least someone wants to know what he is capable of. This time Rayan didn't even have a choice. He had nothing to hide. The blue-haired participant began to carefully study the potential opponents. A dark-haired brunette stood next to him. Rayan didn't expect what happened next. He was prepared to gain a lot, especially if he managed to defeat him. The bald man stared at him. Of course, its dimensions were much more impressive. The main character remembered the girl's body at the very beginning. Then he had a second memory of the next victim. Then he remembered Jurin. And finally about Sarah. At that moment, he was overcome by devilish energy. After a couple of seconds, he came to his senses. Before he had time to come to his senses, the bald man was already rushing towards him. The guy shouted that they couldn't just attack him like that. He could feel his corrupted aura right from there. Then a cry pierced the space that he had done nothing wrong. Baldy said he had done nothing more. The blue-haired guy shouted that there was no need to be so aggressive. The brunette looked away. He was curious about what was happening to him. He pointed at the blonde and asked why exactly he killed her. Rayan knew that God would kill him for such actions. The bald man shouted that the whole thing was that she sent him. The hero looked at him warily. He screamed that he would kill her again if necessary. The girl was ready to tell how she survived the second round. The bald man again replied that if it weren't for God, he wouldn't be here. Rayan replied that such a person would not simply give up, even to death itself. The blue-haired guy intervened in their conversation. He noted that the god's actions in this case were nothing more than fun. The creator has already given a participant a chance once. Sarah was quite strong. Maybe for this reason she was so interesting to God. In this case, Rayan decided that the bald man was much stronger than Sarah, since he gave him a chance. The blonde looked at them carefully. Rayan couldn't believe that she was the strongest. He even felt uneasy about it. However, an image of a boy with his sister appeared in his thoughts. To find the answers, you need to find Ichika. Baldy shouted that he was waiting for the next round. Rayan struck first. The girl was surprised that he was the first to start a fight. Another participant couldn't understand what was happening. The bald man fell to his knees. It wasn't the fairest attack, but he needed an advantage against such a giant. Moreover, this man really irritated him. He struck again. However, he was immediately stopped. Baldy grabbed the protagonist's hand right during the attack. He was no less determined. Then he just cursed. The main character cried out in pain. His arm was damaged. The bald man simply pulled him by the wrist. This time, he couldn't resist at all. He was simply dragged along the ground. The boy couldn't escape from his clutches. His opponent warned him not to attack someone he didn't know. Then he dragged it along the ground again. The main character was already completely exhausted. He was told not to lose consciousness. The bald man laughed that he would have to remember everything from beginning to end. The girl couldn't help him in any way. However, she had time to think of something. The brunette and the green-haired girl stood not far from them, and it seemed that this sight did not amuse them at all. The girl with green hair offered the guy to help her friend. He didn't want to get involved in someone else's fight. The brunette said that now he knows what to do in this game. If he doesn't have the strength, then death will simply await him. The bald man grabbed his hand. The guy was still alive. He was extremely persistent. Now he just wanted to end it all. He just threw the body into the air. Such a weakling cannot be allowed to look down on them. Lightning instantly began to flash from the protagonist's eyes, and he flew down on the bald guy. He began to smile. This was the very moment when he could strike. The boys clashed in battle again. Rayan jumped on him with the speed of a wild animal. The bald man remained on his feet but felt pain. The protagonist jumped on him again and pushed him with his feet. The guy did a somersault in the air, and then gracefully he landed. The blonde smiled admiringly. The green-haired girl screamed that he couldn't just get out. Rayan sat on his haunches, wondering what to do next. He certainly wasn't going to run away in this situation. He remembered the girl's words that he would tell her about himself as soon as he fulfilled her request. The guy wanted to have a little fun. It was as if something clicked inside him. This had happened to him before. The protagonist gathered his strength and attacked the bald man, the pain in his body receding. The bald man was only angry that such a small thing dared to attack him. Rayan felt a sense of sporting interest. He tripped his opponent and dodged his blow. Then he repeated this move again, literally knocking the enemy off his feet. He got a taste for it and seemed ready to even take his life if necessary. The guy narrowed his eyes. It was necessary not to lose the rhythm. The protagonist began to attack again, this time much faster and more nimbly. The bald man didn't want to show him his weak spots. Suddenly he stopped. Rayan decided that it would be better if he destroyed it with his bare hands. The next moment, he was overcome with rage and rushed forward. Despite his size, he hit his opponent with all his might. From that second on, he couldn't stop and continued to beat him with his fists. The blue-haired participant was surprised. At this time, the brunette silently watched what was happening. The blue-eyed girl smiled contentedly. The bald man didn't become any kinder, but he didn't lose consciousness either. He shouted that he was finished. The next moment, a glow appeared around him that was only characteristic of those who possess divine power. Rayan had never seen such a strong aura before. The guy was afraid that his body might not be able to withstand such pressure. Besides, the pain made itself known again. There was no time. The enemy was already flying towards him. Suddenly he stopped. A brunette appeared in front of him. The guy said he had no desire to separate them like school children. If they both don't calm down, he will punish them. The other participants watched what was happening. The bald one definitely didn't want to calm down. The blonde didn't expect anyone to intervene. The bald man was curious about who he was. The brunette explained that it was just another guy who was a participant. The bald man started yelling that no one dared to disturb him. The guy noted that he was betting on the big guy. He suggested that they disperse of their own free will. The bald man replied that everything would end as soon as he finished him off. The young man replied that he was smart enough to come up with something more interesting. The bald man got angry and rushed at him. Obviously, he didn't plan to leave them alive. Then, adjusting his glasses, he turned to him. The next moment, he took off his glasses and with a mysterious smile asked if they could figure out what color his eyes were. Rayan was surprised. He had never seen such a display of power before. The protagonist squatted in front of him. The brunette put his glasses back on. Rayan still hadn't gotten up from his seat. He was impressed by his speed. The brunette made several precise blows at the strongman, and he fell unconscious. Baldy didn't immediately realize the level of his power. For the first time, someone was able to attack him. The observers became worried. One of them decided to remain silent. There could only be one reason why he could have such power. Most likely he became a god. His weapon was his gaze. Rayan thought it was very unfair that such powerful forces were standing in his way. The brunette in glasses hesitated, almost feeling embarrassed by his own power. He got down on one knee in front of the main character and said that in order to challenge such a strong player, you need to have balls. The guy introduced himself. His name was Yun. Then he said that he had seen it before. Yun wanted to know how badly he got into trouble. He turned to the beauty next to him and asked her to heal him a little. The girl smiled sweetly. She had absolutely no reason to refuse such a handsome man. It turned out that they had already met in the second round. The brunette joked that he needed to get to the infirmary before he kicked the bucket. The guy asked him not to pay attention. She took Rayan's hand, and energy began to spread through her palms. Her fingers made several movements that made his hand make a specific crunching sound. The protagonist gritted his teeth in pain, but did not make a sound. He thanked them. When the beauty asked him if it hurt, he lied. She didn't answer. In fact, she knew it hurt. Yun replied that he was always happy to help. Rayan exhaled. Suddenly everything went dark before my eyes and the space began to blur. A vision appeared before his eyes of how quickly he dealt with the gang of participants. This time nothing was going to stop him. Suddenly his eyes lit up and then he saw the creator. He descended majestically, his voice piercing the space. He addressed the main character. It was very interesting for him to watch how he survived in this game. God said that before the game he was someone too. Rayan never expected him to appear. He began to come to his senses, and it turned out that he had lost consciousness. The blonde looked at him and said that she was glad that he came to his senses. She smiled and remarked that he had done well. A participant with green hair entered the room. The guys did not expect her to appear at all. She said he looked much better than the last time they met. Rayan replied that one cannot rely only on God forever. He felt awkward. Besides, I had to risk my life all the time, and he never thought about the consequences. He will most likely have to make an effort. The girl next to him encouraged him, and she said that she was ready to join him. He didn't expect such support from her. She pestered him with the question of whether he had a partner. Rayan didn't know how to answer, but I remembered my partner, whom I met before the last round. The blonde said that if he had someone in mind, he could take him into their trio. But first, Rayan wanted to know her name. The girl smiled awkwardly. Her name was Pak. He liked it. She said he was silly because she didn't choose that name herself. Then she said that now she would not regret taking him into the team. The guy was surprised by such a revelation on his part. Now there was a look of firm determination in her eyes. He understood perfectly well what power meant in this dimension. Moreover, he believed in this era as never before. It was worth far more than the beatings he had suffered in the fight with Tauros. This girl could be someone Rayan could trust. She asked him to stand up. The main character thanked the girl who cured him, Kayla. The girl with green hair invited the guy to follow her. She said that someone wanted to talk to her. It turns out that the little bots of this hospital work for God. They may be mute, but they can still give you a good beating. The substance in the test tube could even save from death. The girl began to rejoice. They walked down the corridor. Rayan frowned. The brunette said that he was ready to knock down the thug in an instant. He stopped. Then he greeted me. His eyes lit up. The force confirmed that the person standing before him was a scoundrel. He immediately threw a small glowing object in his direction. The girls didn't know what to do with him. The brunette realized that he was not the only one. It seemed he noticed that the main character also had unusual eyes. This was his divine power. Rayan noted that he was very observant. Then he explained that he wanted to throw down a challenge. The girl was pleased that the guy stood up for his friend. She respects that. Actually, he just wanted to recruit her. He had something to say. The brunette asked her to leave her girlfriend and join him and Kayla. He then asked him to do his best to win in the third round. He even had the thought of leaving her. After Yoon showed what he was capable of, such thoughts were quite natural. Anyone would have accepted his offer. The protagonist thought that he had no doubt that he would go far in the game of God. Yun uses her divine power without letting others know its secrets. Now the main character needs to show his strength. Anyone would have accepted his offer. It took him just a moment to knock that big guy off his feet. However, hoping that he would stop or spare anyone would be very foolish. Yun used his divine power without letting others understand its secrets. Since this girl has made it this far, she certainly knows how to take care of herself. Not to mention that her healing power will be useful in a team fight. However, she knew a lot of things. The protagonist had several questions left. Besides, he had a feeling that they needed something. Like Shinigen, Yun wanted to understand where his divine power came from. Rayan refused Yun's request to join his team. The boy did not find a third member. At this time, Shinigen appeared. The idiot who tied his blade was in the waiting room. The guy grabbed his glasses, then smiled disarmingly. Shinigen thought that only death could stop such a smug, impudent fellow. The next moment, he lowered his glasses. His eyes glowed with a bright light, of course. He could use such a weapon at any second. However, at that very moment, a girl stopped him. She understood that he was using his superiority. The guy couldn't object to her. Since the fight did not take place, Shinigen was extremely pleased. Looks like we'll have to look for a third team member elsewhere. Yun patted him on the shoulder, and he headed in the other direction, throwing out a phrase about how if he didn't die, he would be interested in chatting again. Shinigen knew he was strong, the second strongest of all those he had seen in this place. Rayan wanted to know who was stronger. Kayla said that Yun is stronger than him. Shinigen replied that he would have to face him. She extended her hand and greeted her partner for the next round. Shingen looked at her with extreme distrust. The main character felt awkward because they needed a third person. Rayan didn't even know that Shinigen would be his partner. The girl quipped that they had found common ground. She looked at them with eyes full of hope. Shinigen had absolutely nothing to say. He took a few steps, and he asked the boys to follow them. The girl was unhappy with this attitude. The last thing he wanted was for someone to take up his time. Rayan wanted to gain the skill of summoning weapons. The protagonist remembered how he fought in the past. He felt uneasy and alienated. Even though he is scared, he could easily imagine all the ways in which the glaive should be used. His mind holds years of experience with this blade. However, he has never trained before. Besides, now he found a reason to live. It remains to be seen what this means. The protagonist said that he could easily imagine all the ways in which the glaive should be used. His mind held years of experience with the weapon, but he had no way to train. His weapon is an extension of him. Shinigen wanted to know how he summoned the weapon in the first round. He asked the protagonist to remember the feeling he experienced then. Rayan thought. Suddenly, energy began to emanate from him. His palms became filled with light. He had a feeling that he had experienced something similar before. Shinigen said that it was the feelings that would help him summon the weapon. The girl asked why God didn't tell him anything and made him figure it out on his own. Lightning instantly appeared in her hands. Sparks began to spread around. It turned out that it was a charge for the blaster. She had no other choice. Rayan also felt that energy began to appear inside him. His eyes began to glow. After the first round, the god reminded us of the power of nostalgia and feelings from the past, and that summoning a weapon requires a very strong emotion. But the main character had a strong desire. When you first summon a weapon yourself, you can do it without thinking. The first round summoning doesn't count, and he couldn't have handled it on his own. God clearly had his way, and he forgot to mention how to use the weapon. Shinigen thought that it was no accident that he was initially shackled. The girl started screaming that she didn't understand how they survived. Handcuffed in the first round, no player he knows has started a game of God at such a disadvantage as he did. The girl looked at him. She needed answers. He began to suspect that God might want him dead, perhaps afraid that he might be stronger than the creator himself. Most likely, it is for this reason that they are trying to limit it. The girl said that God could easily deal with him with his own hands. Rayan didn't understand where the god got such a plan from, whether he hated him or simply saw a competitor. But why would he set up the most ordinary player? Suddenly, the blonde boy drew his sword. Shinigan felt fury. The girl called him a braggart. It was necessary to find that very feeling that would help him with the weapon, and at the same time, not lose his inner world. After winning the second round, they had information on how to return to the past. You suggest that he find this special feeling, but such feelings can only appear once. Otherwise, he will have to fight the next round without weapons. It was necessary to understand that if he succeeded in mastering the weapon, then the team would have to be assembled again. There was no need to be so surprised. Besides, he had already said that he would have to do all this before the second round. Of course, he understood that he was risking his life, and it would be very unwise to say goodbye in the middle of the game. The girl thought that this was too much. Shinigan thought about what 2 million souls could be killed for. In this round, the opponent could be anyone. The blonde looked at him, but she had absolutely nothing to say. She decided to cheer him up. He remembered his mission. He needed to find a feeling that would define him. The boy remembered his feelings from touching the cross for the first time. Rayan remembered his little sister with the cross and her joy at the moment when she brought it to him. And the mother who was nearby. He needed to understand how to find the answer to the question. Maybe he needed to focus on love. He had absolutely no idea what he could feel. From just one grain of a past, he didn't even know he needed to extract what defined him. Tears streamed down the protagonist's cheeks. He remembered about the gift, which became a reason to live for him. If God had not chosen the main character to participate in the game, then he would not have to tremble for his life every time. This monster would take his life, his identity, and absolutely everything. Because of him, he won't even be able to recognize his own sister. There was a great risk of dying in this stupid game with stupid rules. He would have to become stronger. And all these deities who watch with bored faces the chaos that is happening, including the master himself. He had no choice but to grind his sister into dust. To kill a god, you need to develop a plan. One day, he will pick up a piece of paper with his name on it. A shudder ran through him, followed by a flash of lightning. He instantly became furious. The protagonist's eyes widened in surprise. The guy couldn't calm down. A weapon appeared in his hands. The girl screamed that the main character had finally succeeded. True, before this the guy fell out of reality and started laughing. They tried to somehow shout to him. Rayan wanted to know how long he had been in this state. Shinigan said that 3 hours had passed. When the main character came to his senses, the first thing he remembered was a smile. It was at that moment that he remembered the smile that had appeared on his face after Sarah's death. The girl laughed. She was glad that she succeeded. Now they were able to unite. The protagonist was still thinking about what feeling defined him. The partner felt that something was wrong. The protagonist gritted his teeth, and there was confusion inside him. Every action in this game brought him closer to the truth. He had the thought that he might get confused during the game. Moreover, the desire to survive at any cost, and the rage from the desire to kill could turn him into a monster. He turned to his partner. It was difficult for him to cope in this situation alone. The girl said she didn't know who he really was. The main character himself no longer knew who he had become after all this. The boy in that memory seemed so innocent. At what point he had gone so astray that his defining emotion had become the desire to kill, he could not understand. I needed to distract myself from these thoughts. He didn't care what feeling defined him. Besides, the one he remembered no longer had anything in common with the one he was now. Shinigan decided that from now on he would do as he saw fit. At that moment, the main character felt strength and power within himself. No matter who you were before, you can't escape the past. All that was left was to hope that he could fight them. He doesn't care about it as long as he can kill his enemies. It was necessary not to lose humanity. The partner looked at Rayan and invited him to continue the journey together. He suggested practicing before the next round. Shinigan only asked them if they were ready for battle. The protagonist was ready to fight further. The girl turned to the guy and looked at him with eyes full of hope that he was ready to fight just like Rayan. As soon as she saw his inaction, she decided that she would not be able to get anything out of him. In a second, he was ready to start training. Their last hours in Enyo Castle were spent in grueling training under Shinigan's guidance. The guy no longer hid his abilities so fiercely, but it was clear that he was still holding back. Era even helped to analyze various strategies to acquire fighting skills. He was surprised that she treated everyone with such unconditional trust. And all this, just a few hours before the start of the next round. They walked forward. The girl and the main character looked around. Rayan doubted that they hadn't managed to squeeze everyone into one room. There were probably other locks. Shinigan stopped. He needed to see what would happen next. Suddenly a figure appeared in front of him. It was a bearded, fair-haired Viking. He looked very manly. Rayan looked at him carefully. It was immediately obvious that such players could be very dangerous. However, none of them scared him as much as this guy. Shinigan shook his head. He is simply confident that he can deal with any person. The rest stood looking at familiar faces. The judge asked if they were ready to give their lives. The third round was about to begin. The judge immediately recognized their faces. She wondered what they would be willing to sacrifice in this situation. It seemed that this arrangement only amused her. At this point, the master intervened and explained that the team was needed to pass the third round. His partners looked up at him, and he continued that they had about 3 hours left. The next moment, they will have to enter the castle, which will collapse. A warrior in armor appeared before them. Even the judge was surprised. He addressed Fate by name and asked how it was playing here. He wanted to deal with her as soon as possible. The next moment, he entered the gates of the third round. The girl noticed that their communication was as if they knew each other. Rayan said that it was necessary to wait. Era announced the participants' number, which, by the way, had long since exceeded 1,000,000. The judge became indignant at the master and climbed to the gate. Shinigami thought that it would be impossible to cope with such a team just like that. He understood that there would be no other way out. Era suggested that they go through the portal. Rayan was surprised by the judge's calmness and confidence. This was exactly the impression the judge had made on him when they first met. It seemed that fear was unknown to her. If in the first 2 rounds he had been helped by pure luck, now he needed something more. You couldn't rely on your eyes alone as a weapon. He wanted to win by his own efforts. The girl asked him if he was nervous. She thought about it. She was even pleased by this thought, and replied that she was not nervous at all. The main character could only worry about his wounds healing quickly after the battle. It seemed that everything was going according to plan, and there was no reason to worry. The ability to manage your emotions is the key to survival. They went inside. Lighting was needed to see anything in this place. Several torches lit the way. The team became frightened when silhouettes began to appear in the darkness. The Monkey King appeared before them. Rayan saw such a creature in front of him for the first time. Shinigami cursed, and meeting him does not bode well. It turned out that with them was a king named Wukong. He suggested that the boys capture the flag. Enio caused some kind of trouble, so they had to call him out for the third round. They were lucky to have such a leader. He wondered if they could surprise the king. The king smiled. He was interested to know something. A spear appeared in his hands. The creature was ready to play with people. The main character noticed that a weapon had appeared in his hands. The king turned his gaze to the other two. Somewhere in this cave there is a second team, both of which are given a flag. They needed both flags to win. He gave them 3 hours to do everything, on the condition that the killings were permitted. The blonde wanted to know what would happen to them if they lost. This round was a little different from the previous ones. The king explained that he would not touch one of the team. The rest will be eliminated. The king wanted some fun. All they had to do was hold out until the next round. The round will begin when the timer goes off. The creature looked at them carefully. They were curious about what their final plan was. They don't yet know who they will meet along the way. Shinigami asked what strategy to choose. It seemed to him that the best plan would be to attack first. My partner said that the game would start soon. They needed to keep their flag. Shinigami said that it would be better if he thought about himself. The protagonist sighed regretfully, realizing that it wouldn't be easy with such a team. They had about 3 minutes. Rayan decided that despite this, he needed to move on. The girl resolutely moved forward. She noticed that he was nervous. It's strange, but as soon as he starts fighting, something inside him clicks. In moments when he really should have been afraid, he felt nothing. Fights and murders became commonplace. Everything seemed quite ordinary to him. The main character just wanted to understand why this was happening. She was in the memory that was returned to him. They looked around. There was no one nearby. All the participants that the partner met either passed the rounds, or are looking for someone, or want to achieve a certain goal. He didn't need to look for anyone. It's a bit disorienting. Everyone had their own reason for being in this place. She found it complete nonsense. Rayan approached his partner. He saw that she was uncomfortable remembering this. When she was little, she got injured. The protagonist asked her what reason she had to live. The girl needed someone to figure out how to beat the crap out of him. It's the kind of revenge story that someone like Shinigami would enjoy. He turned out to be such a show-off in the end. The girl said she was glad that he was with her in the cave. The protagonist felt awkwardly embarrassed, as he understood that she was asking about stalking. If he hadn't done this, she would never have met him. Besides, it's very difficult to meet a good person during such crazy events. The guy thanked her. Ever since he got into the god game, no one has tried to be friendly. Shinigami was only interested in the object. The partner realized that he would need help in the second round. He underestimated their ancestors. This will not happen again. At that moment, he pulled out his blade. The next moment, he attacked the Monkey King. The creature looked slyly at the man and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Since their last meeting, the guy has acquired a team. Shinigami replied that his interference in the game was illegal, and if God found out about it, he would be in trouble. The creature replied that a large cave would soon appear in this place. However, the king demanded a favor in exchange for helping him win. He replied that he would have to become the strongest in order to win. The participant recalled meeting with the judge and the master that day. She said that they needed as many sponsors as possible. The king pointed his finger at the boy, smiled playfully, and wished him well. He laughed and said that this game was one of the craziest, and that he liked games like that the most. However, this was not his only desire. He wanted Shinigami to kill his comrade. Then he walked up to him and called out his partner's name. All that remained was to finish her off. The likelihood that everything will turn out to be just not that great. Moreover, it was not at all necessary to kill her now. He was given 3 rounds to eliminate her from the game of God. The king reveled in the knowledge that the game's current sponsor would pay for everything. Shinigami thought what the king said sounded insidious, but the creature continued to convince him otherwise. He then said that to do this he needed to kill a strong player. The player joked and said that everything would end when he finished him off. The king replied that such a smart guy would definitely figure everything out. Most likely, only those with the strongest will survive. There was only one task left to complete: to kill Era. And yet it was unclear what Rayan would think of him. He's just another competitor that needed to be gotten rid of. The goal had to be achieved at any cost. At this time, they had been unable to figure out what to do next for more than an hour. A silhouette loomed ahead. It turned out that they saw a flag, but he was hostile. However, there was no one in this place. Suddenly, the main character felt movement. They pounced on him. The girl ran to the main character. All that was left was to draw the weapon. Most likely it was because he was having a lucky day. The main character got angry. It was unclear why they did it. Another player, seeing all this, laughed out loud. The blonde said that these idiots really decided to get rid of them, and in a very dishonest way. The third was nowhere to be seen. It looked like things were heading towards a fight. They had some unfinished business with them. The girl understood that the plan she had come up with was complete crap. The protagonist thought that 3 hours should be enough to stop all of this. The bald man began to rejoice that the gods were on their side. He smiled, grateful that they had come into his clutches of their own accord. Then he explained to his partner to do what he wanted. The player also decided that this was the right decision. He asked to be reminded who had been helping him all this time. The girl armed herself. Then she pointed the blaster at the player. The participant of the game was unable to stay on his feet. He almost succeeded in realizing his plan. The girl said that all the power was in the ice. It turned out that with such enemies there would be a lot of trouble. The player lowered his head in confusion, because the sight was pointed to the side. She then activated her divine power. A special energy arose around her. Several powerful pieces of ice flew towards the enemy. The player easily repelled the attack. Tauros told him all his tricks. Maybe he has some tricks other than bullets. Telling everything to my friends wasn't the best decision. At this time, the blonde raised her weapon. The blaster fired a warning shot. Then she noticed that divine power was not at all what it seemed. She even felt cheerful for a moment. At this time, the bald man stepped forward. He was overcome with rage and rushed forward. The enemy has gained strength. She then said that her power was limited to some bullets. It looks like the girl has decided to show her cards. This power has many uses, and Era wielded it almost perfectly. Callista's ice barriers provided perfect protection, and Thoros' brute strength acts as a terrifying attacking force. This is an extremely dangerous duo. The main character saw another participant. The guy stood rooted to the spot. He didn't know what to say in the end. If you decide to be a spectator. At this time, Era approached him and said that she already knew what they were talking about. His gloves accumulate the power of the Tauros and throw it out in one fell swoop, like an explosive. The same thing happened in the second round, and he still doesn't understand it. The hero was ready to activate the power. He wanted his eyes to see what was hidden inside. The main character thought that someone wanted to steal something from him. The girl thought that he was always ready for crazy things. She didn't expect this. Rayan was overcome with excitement and immediately headed into battle. Baldy said that the only solution in this case is death. One of the players activated his power and rushed to attack. Rayan understood that divine power of this level was not just ice, something more terrible could await him. The partner immediately understood this. A second later, ice arrows destroyed the walls of the stone cave. The participant of the round stood in place in a stupor. At this time, the bald man pounced on the main character and hit the guy with all his strength. Rayan immediately realized that he would not forgive him for this blow. His gloves began to shine. The next moment, an explosion was heard behind the main character. It seemed to him that he would not be able to survive a blow of such force. He knew that Tauros was strong. It was thanks to the gauntlets of power that he was able to deliver such a devastating blow. Within a second, the main character was rushing towards the enemy with his lightning-fast glaive. It turns out that as soon as an attack begins, Rayan doesn't miss the opportunity to show off his skills. Baldy tried to dodge the hurricane of attacks. At the same time, the enemy successfully repelled all his attacks, and the main character had no idea how to defeat him. Rayan attempted a sweep, but his opponent managed to jump into the air, so the sweep with the weapon failed. The main character did not expect such a trick. Rayan realized that one more movement and the gloves of power would reach him. The guy managed to dodge. Now all he had to do was grab him from behind. The protagonist tried to trip up his opponent again. Although Tauros did not give him the opportunity to attack directly, he still didn't see any way to deal with it quickly. A few moments passed before the protagonist realized that the enemy had trapped him in ice. The player froze in place in surprise. Callista has been covering for Tauros all this time. In previous fights, when he fought his opponent one-on-one, there was no such problem. All of their attacks, on command, could lead to a successful outcome of the game. Rayan immediately realized that such impudence knew no bounds. The gloves of power had almost caught up with Rayan. He was in a hopeless situation. It seemed like there was no way to free himself from the ice. Tauros knocked the main character's body out of the ice with one blow. Rayan crashed into the cave wall. His partner was afraid that he would die. The brunette who was standing next to Tauros asked him not to interfere in what was happening. Tauros was glad that victory was on his side. The guy was angry. He saw that Rayan would not be able to get up. Realizing that the wounds were serious, Tauros wanted to get the maximum pleasure from killing. Then he grabbed the main character by the head. The enemy was ready to crush it in his hand. Tauros noticed that he had already seen such eyes in God. Rayan couldn't answer the question of who he was to this creature that everyone called a god. Moreover, the creator himself didn't explain anything to him, and the wounds were too severe. Callista was surprised that he was going to interrogate him. Immediately, the thought arose in my head that the guy needed to be finished off. A second later, the weapon's impact pierced the player's shoulder. Tauros didn't immediately understand what was happening. The brunette stopped in a stupor. Rayan could not resist Tauros in any way. Suddenly, he saw the barrel of a blaster. Someone behind him clearly voiced the command to release Rayan. It was a girl, a player with eyes of an amazing color, but for some reason different. In her hands, she had a loaded blaster. The partner was falling into the unknown, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to move along her path. Everyone else had a reason to fight. Even if it was just survival, they desperately wanted to live. She had never had such a feeling this world turned out to be cruel for her. Moreover, the game of God somehow assumed only one single winner. She was visited by a memory of the time when she met the main character, but she couldn't think only about herself all the time. The girl felt complete indifference to everything. She began to question what she was ultimately fighting for. The next moment, she saw another player in front of her and a loaded blaster. The bald man pointed to the main character, who was so wounded that he could not get up from the ground. He was surprised that no one had taken the chance to deal with him earlier. The round participant responded that she had other plans. Tauros let out a threatening cry. Besides, all the time he had the power that was capable of saving anyone. She decided that she would not go into the next round alone. Tauros was ready to take on the girl's team. The idea came to their minds that it would be nice to bring back the desire to live. Tauros grabbed the girl by the head. The girl was in pain. She could not resist the power of the gloves. Tears welled up in her eyes. There was no defense against the power of Tauros. Lily remained selfless and optimistic even this year. If anyone deserved to survive, it was her. No matter how many times she shot at Tauros, he stood firmly on his feet. Maybe if she had pulled out the second gun, she could have killed him faster and saved Lily. The girl looked at the dead bodies, and at that moment, more than anything, she felt offended that her game partner had died. It occurred to her that everyone who played God was a potential rival of hers. This made tears roll down her cheeks. At the same time, she tried to hold on until the very end. Now she wanted revenge because she shouldn't have died like this. This regret haunted her every minute, from the very end of the second round. The stupidity was that she could cope alone. The girl decided that she would never allow her partners to be killed. Callista decided to keep her emotions in check. The blonde still hit her and wounded her. However, she was not going to stop at just one shot. It was necessary to somehow prepare for the next shot. Tauros shouted to her that it was a trap. Another shot was fired towards Callista. She understood that she could get out. She just had to figure out how to do it. It was necessary to somehow reflect the blow, but the shot was already flying in her direction. There was absolutely nowhere for her to escape from this shot. The shot pierced her body. Blood splattered in all directions. The blonde was surprised that her blow was able to reach her. Depending on the gun, the divine power will behave differently. The first is related to the flash, which allows him to avoid small objects and control their trajectory with his gaze. The second pistol contains a concentrated spark, with which he can accelerate objects. Tauros realized that it was a mistake. Callista also realized that this time there would be no options. This time I'll have to hold back. Callista clutched her wound. The pain was unbearable. Gathering all her last strength, she decided to fight back against Tauros. Tauros addressed the girl by name. She decided that she could handle him. Turning his head to the side, the participant in the game spoke his order that no one should dare to disturb him. Tauros and the other player remained silent. Then Baldy decided that it would be better to destroy her. A few seconds later, the space was illuminated by divine power. Era stopped and lowered her weapon. Immediately, the player used a technique called Divine Calic. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps. Warriors in armor appeared out of nowhere. This was that very cold death. Rayan didn't expect all these warriors to appear here. The player's laughter echoed throughout the area. At this time, the blonde grabbed 2 blasters and took aim. The warriors, on command, moved towards her to destroy her. She had no choice but to defend herself with weapons. It was necessary to figure out how to defend against such a number of warriors. She had to let off some sparks. The charges flew towards them without stopping. Then she reloaded her weapon again and sent out another wave. The warriors, for some reason, stood rooted to the spot. Tauros didn't expect her to be able to fire so many charges. The girl thought that all the bullets were moving as if they were in slow motion. The spark allowed her to control the degree of acceleration for different objects. One of the players realized what was happening. Seeing another hail of shells, he realized that he needed to find cover. Callista was overcome with rage. At that moment, she knew that in front of her was a man who didn't care about his own life. As soon as the warriors approached the girl, she wanted to understand why she was fighting. One flash of light could change the course of events. She stood and watched as the warriors fell under the onslaught of bullets. She had no choice but to continue shooting, filling the air with so many bullets that they turned into lead rain. She had to quickly assess the number of warriors. The charges flew right on target. The soldiers could not dodge such a number of bullets. At that moment, she turned her gaze to the side. Hundreds of charges headed towards the player, breaking through a spherical wave. The girl understood that it was more difficult to cope alone. She fired another hail of bullets, each one hitting its target. The army immediately began to dissolve. The ice around began to melt. There was no more strength left. The participant of the round fell to his knees. Rayan decided that he no longer needed to fight for a goal. Now his goal was to fight for others. By the way, it didn't sound so bad. The protagonist assessed her fighting skills. Considering the number of opponents, it was impressive. The fight is over. Tears rolled down Callista's cheeks. It seemed that fate was now in the hands of another player. Era shot at the player. Tauros could not understand how this was possible. Rayan didn't expect the shot. The second player was also shocked by the sudden death before his eyes. The blonde called out to Tauros, and she said that it was his turn next. The hero understood that the girl was strong, but not to that extent. Callista's body lay peacefully on the ground, surrounded by ice. Tauros was angry. Wasn't he going to do something? Tauros shouted at him. The brunette who was standing next to him offered to be his partner. Rayan realized that they were talking about a contract. The judge immediately offered to make a deal. Tauros yelled that as soon as he finished cutting up those two, he would think about the offer. He slammed his power gloves into the ground. Rayan replied that it could have been better. He felt like he still had a chance. Tauros's blows became more and more powerful. The hero got scared. The girl understood that he was becoming stronger and stronger. A bull emerged from the earth. His divine power turned into a bull. He took a few steps. A minotaur appeared behind him. It was much larger in size than they expected, so they had to attack immediately. The girl immediately pointed the blaster at him. Tauros rushed into the attack. All the power was immediately concentrated in his hands. However, the girl managed to dodge. She couldn't let him hit her. They didn't have enough time. Rayan immediately flew to the side from the blow. He screamed. He didn't know if she would make it out in time. Tauros attacked him with his gloves again. Rayan couldn't let his partner die. His strength was great, but the speed was much greater. Suddenly, a spark of fire pierced Tauros. He immediately swore. The girl was wounded, but she hit the target right on target. Apparently, the big guy needed to be taught a lesson. The girl immediately dodged the divine power. She barely managed to dodge. Her leg was injured. However, she tried not to fall. Rayan screamed when he saw that she was injured. He also had to activate divine power. All that remains is to quickly come up with a way to kill Tauros. The hero swore. All that remained was to get to him in time. Rayan was unable to stay on his feet from the blow. The wave was so strong that it threw him several meters away. After a few seconds, the fog began to clear. The partner was breathing heavily and had almost no strength. The longer this battle lasted, the stronger Tauros became. They needed to kill him now, otherwise there would be no point in fighting. Even in this state, she was ready to fight with him. The guy was surprised by this. Rayan couldn't rely on others to always be there to save him. The girl single-handedly dealt with such a crowd of warriors. Even at the end of their strength, they were ready to fight side by side. Callista became the second person in this terrible game who spoke to the main character without any fear. The boy arrived first. In front of Tauros stood a guy who looked about 17 years old. He cheerfully offered himself as his partner. He said it with such confidence, as if he was considered the strongest in the room. Besides, only he had the right to look at him. The others were afraid of him. The guys sealed the agreement with a handshake. Unfortunately, not everything went according to plan in the second round. He could have died and lost the game. If only he could protect him, he would have no more regrets. But he didn't know his name at that moment. There might not have been a second chance to avenge his partner. Tauros could not stop fighting, knowing that the killer was still alive. When he woke up, he realized that he was still in the mortal world. He looked at Callista. She replied that if he didn't flaunt his prey, then everything would be fine. She extended her hand to him and asked him to tell her what had happened. They didn't have much time before the third round began, but instead of training or looking for a team, Callista sat and listened. She thought that revenge would make things easier. Tauros was at a loss to take revenge on someone he didn't even know. Callista replied that he had no choice. That was the game. It was a pity that he lost his comrade in battle. She offered to find his killer. Tauros was surprised that someone wanted to team up with him in this game. Maybe that's why he couldn't gather his strength now. Tauros's spirits perked up a little. In any case, there would have been a high chance of survival between the two of us. As soon as Callista tasted what they called food, she immediately grimaced in displeasure. Tauros smiled for the first time since the game started. The master allowed him to remember who he was before that he was a builder. Ultimately, he had to come up with a tactic that would frighten his enemies. For a second, he wondered what the other participants were like before the game began. Deep down, he was tormented by the question of where his family had gone. A fight awaited him again. Rayan was already rushing towards him. Tauros immediately activated the power of the gloves. The main character went on the attack without hesitation. It was not easy for him to dodge the attacks. Last time it was Tauros who started the battle, so this time the protagonist decided to take him by surprise. Memories of the moment he lost his partner instantly flashed through his mind. Then what happened to Callista? Tauros shouted at the guy. Blood began to flow down Rayan's cheeks. The enemy in front of him was ready to go berserk. It was this rage that in a second turned into a desire to kill. Tauros almost missed another blow in his direction. The protagonist wanted to throw him off balance. Rayan grabbed the glyph. The enemy was in for a precise blow from which there was no escape. The enemy tensed up and managed to grab the weapon right at his throat. Rayan just stepped on his chest and tried to do everything to drive the weapon into him. Tauros was distracted by a sudden pain in his shoulder. It was a blaster shot. A second later, the bullets reached Tauros, riddling his body. Pain and hatred were all he felt at that moment. He had lost his partner and was now dying himself. The main character felt a little sorry that he would leave the game so quickly. Such a dangerous enemy cannot be left alive. All the guy thought about before his death was the impossibility of taking revenge. Era had almost no strength left. She spent most of it on the shot. In this situation, Tauros could only take out his anger on the main character. Then he grabbed his head like a toy. The pain was unbearable. The partner pointed the blaster in their direction. Every second counted. Tauros was overcome by the spirit of vengeance. He remembered everything that connected him with his partner. And again, he reached out to Rayan. If it weren't for the shot, the hero would already be dead. The guy needed a few seconds to come to his senses. His head was hurting unbearably. Now Tauros realized that he and his partner had both lost. Maybe he'll have better luck in the next game. The boy fell to his knees in front of him. In his hands, he held a piece of paper on which it was written that Tauros was looking for his wife and those who could be trusted. Besides, he was alone all his life. His goal in the game was no less important. All he had to do was take the flag. The brunette replied that he would do this only after he made a deal with God. Rayan inquired about the conditions. It was necessary to destroy everyone and do it only with our own hands. After these words, he immediately activated his combat power. Rayan didn't expect such a turn of events. The brunette asked Cthulhu what he thought of them. Cthulhu replied that he saw them as a sign of weakness. Era and the main character could not believe that such a creature was communicating with them. The guy made a sarcastic comment about their fighting skills. Cthulhu addressed Rayan. They decided it would be better to bet on Era. At least she had a blaster. The protagonist wanted to understand their tactics. He thought that if he killed him first, it wouldn't matter what kind of power he had. The enemy grinned. Cthulhu immediately applied domination. The brunette was overcome by his power. It's time to show the divine power of Cthulhu. Rayan was a little scared. The space in front of him darkened for a moment. But what this illusion was completely incomprehensible to him. A mirage appeared in front of him. There should have been a solid floor under his feet. An unknown force engulfed his body. She began to move it in space. He felt unsafe. A moment later, he saw Cthulhu in front of him. The creature wanted to know what he feared most. It hoped that its greatest fear would be death. If not, then only fear associated with God remained. At that moment, the power of Cthulhu lifted him into the air. Cthulhu said that he should fear him. An image of Era appeared before him. She was wrapped in tentacles. Shinnigan appeared next to her, and Cthulhu slyly asked what would happen if he lost these people who had become his friends during the game. Rayan gritted his teeth and ordered no sudden movements. Cthulhu crushed them into powder with his powerful tentacles. Then he showed him the image of his sister. He expected a feeling of fear from him. The creature was curious about what would happen if he never found her in this game, and he will have the opportunity to learn the truth that the game is hiding from him. This was precisely the truth that his God had hidden. He was terribly curious about what he had forgotten in the game of God. Moreover, such a participant has already been in the game before. He needed to know why this game was created. However, he was not included as a participant. It was just a part of the divine power. It turned out that the divine power and Heighten's weapon might have something in common. The power of a god awakened in Rayan, capable of dealing with them in the blink of an eye. Cthulhu was surprised. Rayan immediately understood that such a creature would act through meanness and cunning. He escaped from the captivity of a mad dreamer. A moment later, the guy was again holding the ragdoll with Cthulhu in his hands. Rayan realized that he was wounded. His partner was nowhere nearby, and he began to get nervous. Era pointed her gun at him and shouted that she would stop all this. The partner saw that she was overcome by the spell of Cthulhu. The guy rushed towards her. Besides, it was a mirage. She couldn't remain strong for that long. Rayan looked at her carefully. Then she put the blaster to her temple and said that she had no other choice. The The blaster's bolt clicked. The guy lowered his eyes. Then he suddenly jumped up and grabbed her by the arm, not giving her the opportunity to shoot. She was still under the power of Cthulhu. The guy didn't understand what to do in this situation. He gritted his teeth, and he clenched his fists. He had to use force against the girl. She flew forward several meters. The brunette appreciated the blow. Rayan looked at her body, and he said that she definitely deserved better. Her body lay motionless. It wasn't her fault. As he watched them fight, Era seemed like a more interesting opponent. He screamed that he would finally put his plan into action. Rayan looked at the guy as if he was crazy. Then I asked him what it all meant. The brunette replied that it was all because of the bloodthirsty voice in his head. Cthulhu told him something that others did not know. That's why he was overcome with madness. Rayan listened to the guy attentively. Before this, Haiten was calm and quiet. That was until Cthulhu appeared in his life. He began to lose touch with reality. Cthulhu took advantage of this as best he could. This was his strength. Gradually, he drove his owner crazy. He wanted to know what to do next. Rayan was once again enveloped by the influence that emanated from Haiten. The guy was falling into the abyss of the unknown. He was even scared. Suddenly, a divine light awakened within him. Memories from a past life appeared before the guy. He found himself in a room. The guy saw a terrible picture in front of him. The dead body lay motionless, holding origami in its hand. It was a mother with a child in her arms, and the head of the family was lying next to them. Rayan understood that this could be either a real memory or an illusion. But he didn't understand what it was for. Tears streamed down my cheeks. It was more like a memory. Haiten stood in front of him as if nothing had happened. What angered him was that he couldn't figure out how real what he saw with his own eyes was. Haiten was pleased. His body should have told him. A shudder ran through him. This was the first time this had happened to him. First rage, now he was trembling. Haiten was pleased with the result of his trickery. It was the fault of the madman who lived inside him. Most likely, madness was characteristic of some players of this game. Rayan couldn't help himself. Cthulhu wanted to discuss something with him. He actually heard an unfamiliar voice speaking to him from the depths of his consciousness. Besides, he remembered Tengen. At that moment, he was glad that he had managed to deal with him and Sarah. Deep down, he knew that part of his humanity had disappeared. In the end, even Haiten felt madness within himself. Cthulhu called people pathetic. Energy began to thicken around the main character again. He felt God inside him. Haiten immediately recognized the true God in the main character. The guy began to rejoice that he had finally managed to cope with it. Cthulhu wanted to make him his champion. The guy replied to Cthulhu that this was disrupting his plans. Rayan couldn't let him kill him. Haiten looked at him. For a guy, it's personal. Cthulhu replied that he would remember everything. He remembered the past, although God had not yet awakened his memories. God could not restrain his present self. The deity inside Rayan began to laugh. Most likely, they wanted him to be the first in this game. Haiten didn't expect that God had plans to make him a champion. Cthulhu wanted his divine power to merge with the power of the creator. The guy didn't want to lose this game. There were few options, and besides, Cthulhu was too persistent. Rayan needed some time to think. The guy replied that he had not forgotten what happened to his family. He just wanted other people's affairs to no longer concern him. Haiten didn't know what to do next. He couldn't believe that he could easily destroy the power of Cthulhu himself. To destroy all illusions, he will have to make a lot of effort. Rayan smiled. The guy jumped into the air, realizing that he was ready to finish him off. He wanted them to answer for their words and get what they deserved. The guy went on the attack. Haiten tried to create a new illusion to deceive him. Now they found themselves in the desert, and a whole canyon separated him from the enemy. He smiled madly, knowing that no one could stop him. The guy shattered that illusion again. Haiten saw that they had broken through to him again. The next illusion was a train rushing towards him. However, this too was unable to stop him. The guy broke through another darkness. He was unusually fast. Then he materialized a glaive, leaving the guy no chance. Cthulhu was still watching them. Haiten created a woman's illusion. She addressed the protagonist by name. The guy instantly remembered her. He felt uneasy. With one movement of the glaive, he cut through space. A severed head flew into the air. Cthulhu released another illusion. Rayan jumped as high as he could. The creature created doubles. True, the brunette did not expect that he would be able to do this. The main character was surrounded on all sides. Rayan wanted to estimate the number of doubles. He began to attack them one by one. The hero attacked him again. The guy didn't understand what to do next. Haiten attacked him with his fists, but missed. Rayan successfully repelled the attack, and destroyed another clone. Unfortunately, he couldn't stop them all with his divine power, but that only made him happier. The doubles shouted in unison that they had prepared a surprise for him. Divine power turned out to be more than just power. Cthulhu, thanks to eye contact, was able to draw his opponent into an illusion that he himself created. The danger was that these illusions were deadly in the real world. All that remained was to create further illusions. He had to land blow after blow to deal with him. Rayan couldn't cope with all of his doubles. Haiten could switch places with his illusions, which amused Rayan. He knew he would be ignored, so he decided to act through the number of copies. The hero smiled, and he began to attack one after another. It wasn't difficult to move. It was much more difficult to quickly deal with such a number of copies. He held a weapon in his hands, which dealt with each of the enemies with lightning speed. We had to move too quickly, and don't give them the opportunity to attack. Divine power gave him acceleration. Rayan dealt with another illusion. He was ready to grab it with his bare hands. The main character did not want to spare anyone. The glaive was aimed straight at the opponent's head. As soon as he pierced it through, the illusion dissolved. Then another illusion. Blood flowed from the hero's eyes. Hearing a familiar sound behind him, he turned around. He saw Heighten with a blaster, threatening to kill his partner. Blood was running down the guy's cheeks. Rayan paused for a second. He grimaced. No one would save him this time. Heighten hoped he was lying. Can illusions no longer help him? He'll start with the hand that has the stupid doll sticking out of it. He felt uneasy that he would let his partner die so easily and simply. Rayan understood that he would do everything to catch him. Ultimately, only one will survive in this game anyway. The hero armed himself with a glaive, and divine power awakened within him. He stopped abruptly. The guy used freezing. No one would have just let him kill his friend. The guy grabbed his neck. The glaive fell out of his hands with a clang and collapsed to the ground. This time, winning won't be so easy. He didn't need his power. The suffocation wouldn't go away. He had the feeling that these were his last minutes. Rayan didn't know anything. In the round with Shinigin, he decided that he could find the truth. The last thing he wanted was for him to turn into someone like him. The protagonist hoped that he had a choice. The memory of the cross came into his mind. He couldn't lose another person close to him. Divine power surrounded him. Heighten shouted that he had a chance to win. He didn't remove the blaster from the hostage's temple. The guy took a few steps forward. The figure approached the hostage. It was Shinigin. He grabbed the girl in his arms and freed her from Heighten. Rayan was surprised to see him here. Heighten released another illusion. The main character's partner immediately understood what the brunette was up to. In front of him, he saw two corpses. He asked him and Era to hide in a safe place. The main character grabbed the guy by the shoulder. He asked his partner to win. He had no other option. He himself went to Heighten to deal with him. Shinigin lowered his head guiltily, as he saw that the boy was tired and injured. Rayan decided that it was precisely his strength that helped him cope with the fight. The guy was determined. All it took was one round. Was it necessary to change beyond recognition? Shinigin grabbed Iru in his arms. Rayan asked his partner not to die before him, and he warned him that Heighten had the power to create illusions. He pointed the blaster at him. The main character rushed at him. The brunette pointed a gun at him. He was skilled at creating illusions, but he managed to deal with them. Shinigin considered it an honor to fight side by side with such an incredible partner. There remained hope that in this world one could still trust someone. His gaze switched to Heighten and he cursed. Rayan jumped into the air, holding the glyph in his hands. The enemy did not expect this at all. Shinigin didn't expect that he could dodge the bullet. Unfortunately, the glaive was hit by a bullet. However, he successfully parried the blow. It took a special reaction to be faster than a bullet. Rayan was as fast as he could be. The next moment, he deflected a hail of bullets. Shinigin stayed close to him and tried to help him. It was necessary to move on. He walked forward. The hero thanked him for saving Era. It was unclear to him what else he could do in this situation. It seems that his work was finished there. Shinigin activated divine power. Heighten pointed the blaster at the blonde boy. Rayan immediately ran up to him, not giving him the opportunity to shoot. He easily destroyed the illusion. He thrust the glaive into his chest. Rayan began to deftly spin the weapon in the air. And then he lowered the glaive. Heighten cursed. He had lost his opponent. Cthulhu replied that it was all a matter of speed. He remembered his battle with Thoros. Now he looks more like his true self. Seeing the trajectory of bullets is one thing, but not keeping up with them is another. Shinigin grabbed the flag while holding Eru in his arms. Cthulhu thought that this was what predicted the trajectory. He could see the future. What Shinigin wanted most now was to see the future. Rayan had to activate divine power. He found himself in a special place, took a few steps. The voice in his head made itself known to him again, and told him that he had now managed to take control of his body. He continued that his inner spirit was weak, and could not withstand such a level of control. And he said that if this continues, they will be killed. His double appeared before him and said that he could deal with his enemy himself. Rayan replied that he trusted him, but he needed to survive. The image said that it was ready to give him a hint. The speech was about his divine power. A series of illusions of doubles appeared before the main character again. Heighten was angry. He felt that such power was not enough for him alone. Rayan again gave in to divine power. The brunette shouted at him not to come near him, otherwise he would shoot. He had no choice but to attack him. Cthulhu appeared before Rayan. Most of these bullets are illusions. It was important not to miss the real shot. Rayan knew his eyes couldn't keep up with all the shots. The enemy wanted to do everything to make his brain tired. Rayan rushed forward. Cthulhu appreciated his tenacity in battle. The guy didn't give up. Doubles began to attack from all sides, and the main character only had time to dodge them. Heighten gritted his teeth in displeasure. The hero was about to throw the glyph at him. The enemy wanted to focus on another body. He grabbed the glaive as if it were a spear. Cthulhu stopped Heighten. Rayan took a few steps. The guy looked away. All illusions remained just a deception. He wanted to stop the game as soon as possible. Rayan began to spin the glaive. Heighten threw down his weapon and said that he was an idiot. The brunette replied that he had had enough. Moreover, his divine power was much more powerful. The guy said goodbye to his illusion. He wanted to attract attention to himself. The guy hit him in the face. The enemy screamed in pain. The young man attacked the enemy. The guy fell to the ground. Rayan reached out to Cthulhu. As soon as he touched her, she turned into a rag doll. He understood that if he didn't change his activities, then it would be unclear what would happen next. Immediately, he remembered the deception. The brunette opened his eyes. What he did made it impossible for him to win this game. Heighten opened his eyes, but he still didn't have the strength to get up. He proved to be a worthy opponent. The last thing the enemy managed to say was goodbye, and say that he would look forward to meeting him again. Rayan decided to wish him good luck. The guy grabbed the glaive like a spear, and electrical charges began to appear around the weapon. A lifeless body lay behind him. The protagonist cast a piercing glance. He noticed that there was a piece of paper in his trouser pocket. The guy pulled her out. He had to figure out what his purpose in fighting in this game was. Rayan turned around and walked away in the other direction. Shinnigan held the flag and did not let go of the girl. The mission was to continue the game. The boy remembered his meeting with the king, and a request to kill Erupak. Then the king said that if he did this, he would help him. And only then will he invest and become his sponsor. Era did not come to her senses. The partner became worried. The hand lowered the flag. An insect appeared near the main character and congratulated him on his victory. This is truly an entertaining fight. The king knelt before him. Rayan thought about the origin of his divine power. The king was surprised that God himself gave him his eyes. He had never done that before. The boy didn't wait for the king to attack him and activated his inner power. The king replied that every deity has a secret that he guards like the apple of his eye. The creature also wanted to figure out what was going on. A door appeared in front of him, through which those who were ready to move on to the next round entered. Rayan was most interested in where his partners were. The king decided that it would be better if he could find them himself. The guy lowered his head and remained silent. It was necessary to see what was hidden behind the entrance. The guy opened the door. There was a shining light in front of him. The king just pushed him in the back. The guy found himself in a room unknown to him. It took him a few seconds to come to his senses. Suddenly, Yoon appeared in front of him. The brunette replied that it was not for nothing that he told him that they would have to meet again. The main character wanted to know where Kayla was. Yoon replied that they managed to survive despite everything. A great warrior appeared before them, reminding them that they were part of a game. The Viking said that friendship would not help them cope with the gods and survive. Rayan gritted his teeth. He was one of the strongest warriors of Enyo Castle. He won the third round without the help of his partners. A couple of seconds later, another person appeared in front of them. The brunette looked at him and said that the round had already begun. Yoon thought she was cute. They were curious about the reason Wukong separated them from the team. At this time, a voice was heard from above, which suggested that they play a game. A creature descended from a portal in the ceiling. It solemnly announced that the winner would become the champion. He took out his weapon and said that talent was the most important thing he had. Pointing the weapon, the king said that skill was most important. Rayan was surprised. Yoon just looked sternly at the creature. The Viking was completely unwavering. The brunette with the high bun was confused. She had never been in such a situation before. After the king saw their reaction, he laughed and pointed the gun at himself. At this time, in the heavenly residence of God, the judge came to bow to him. Other deities stood near his throne, Matter Era, also present at the audience. The judge protested that they couldn't just pick champions and empower them at their own discretion. If this is allowed to happen, the balance will be disturbed. The judge realized that they were talking about Rayan. God replied that anyone could talk about balance, especially since he did not put him in the same conditions as everyone else, and he also hid his divine power. The judge yelled that he was being unfair, causing him to lose. God replied that he needed some information. Now he was interested in the main character. The Monkey King replied that today's game is one of his favorites. He laughed and said that they were in for Russian roulette. Then he began to explain the rules of the game to them. There were 3 bullets in the pistol. If there's a bullet in the chamber, it will fire and blow their brains out. You will need to play until only one is left alive. Yun replied that the incident could take his life. The reality is that to survive in his world, all you need is skill and talent. The king began to spin the pistol cylinder. Then he threw the weapon on the table. And he announced that Yun would go first. The guy looked closely at the weapon. Rayan replied that it was necessary to wait, and besides, there had to be another way to continue the round, or find another way out of the situation. In a deadly game where everything depended on luck, there was no other way out. He put the gun to his temple, and he pulled the trigger. Rayan got scared and started yelling at his partner. Next was the Viking's turn. The girl behind him replied that this was not possible. She shouted that the game was a matter of luck. The king thought. He found it much more interesting this way. The brunette called him crazy. The Viking also put a gun to his throat. Then he handed it to the girl, and she was surprised that not a single muscle of his trembled with fear. Yoon asked him not to be discouraged. Rayan hoped there was a way out. The girl held a gun in her hands. She wished she had another choice. She pressed her lips together in fear and resentment. The king realized that she did not want to play his game, so he replied that he would deal with her himself if she did not do what he said. Rayan wondered why Wukong hadn't said anything about this round. After the first round, he was sent to a room. The second round ended with them heading to Enyo's castle. The girl was scared, and there were more and more questions. Wukong wanted to see how the game ended. If this doesn't happen, then Yun will be right. However, with each move, the chance of survival decreased. There were 3 bullets left in the cartridge, so there was still a chance of dying. Tears streamed down her cheeks and she began to curse. A second later, blood splattered in all directions. Rayan was struck with stupor. The players stood and looked at the girl's body. The king clapped his hands and said that they played well. There are 2 participants left. Wukong took a few steps. He took the pistol that fell from the hands of the dead participant. Then he handed the weapon to the main character. He wanted to know how lucky the guy was. The guy grabbed the gun again. He felt uneasy about what had happened. The guy exhaled. The girl's body lay motionless. Unfortunately, it was already impossible to help her. He was still holding the gun in his hands. Then he handed it to the king, and he scolded him for being too cruel, like the other gods. Wukong realized that he was using the god's gaze. Therefore, the guy could predict what awaited him in the future. The king was dissatisfied with the guy's advantage. Rayan looked at the pistol, trying to figure out if there was a bullet in the cylinder. He put the gun to his chin. Suddenly, he stopped and said that he wanted to spin the pistol's cylinder again. He said that this way the game would be much more fun. Wouldn't it be more interesting if the chances of death were reset every round? The king needed a couple of minutes to think. After thinking it over, he replied that he would go to meet him. He took the gun and spun the cylinder again. It turned out that he saw that there would be a bullet in the chamber. Thus, spinning the drum will increase his chances of survival. After these thoughts, he looked intently at the king. The Viking caught his puzzled look. As soon as the trigger was pulled, the sound of a gunshot was heard all around. Now he was much more interested. He took the pistol from the king's hands. He put it to his temple. However, the god's gaze told him that something was wrong. Suddenly, he pointed the gun at Yoon. The brunette realized that this time he had no choice either. Last time we met, it was different. Wasn't that against the rules? The Viking said that this was a violation of the rules. Besides, this game of God no longer belonged to him. The king smiled, as he understood that for him this was nothing more than entertainment. Rayan replied that this would make things much more fun for the king of macaques. Yoon didn't want to end his journey just like that. The protagonist replied that this was just a way to leave the game. The king remained silent. Suddenly, Rayan pointed the barrel of the pistol at the king. Wukong replied that he would not forgive him for this. The guy smiled. He understood that in this way he would force the deity to fight him and accept his challenge. Rayan kept his eyes on him and the barrel of the gun. As soon as he pulled the trigger, the bullet did not fly out. Then a fist flew into his face. The guy hit him with all his might. It was a Viking. He was tired of putting up with the antics of this little god. Then Yoon attacked him. Yoon asked again what color his eyes ended up being. He had to activate his power. He attacked the macaque. The king's body flew so far that it suddenly broke through the wall. Yoon said he was very pleased. The guy replied that despite all this, they would still remain his enemies. Then the voice asked him not to be distracted. Rayan did not lower the gun and said that this was his game. He would have to kill him. At this time, in the space residence, the creator himself continued his conversation with the judge. She replied that some part of her was indeed afraid of him. God wanted to know for what reason. It turned out that he had a future available to him. So now his goal was to make sure that this future did not come true, and everything went according to his plan. Master Era took a few steps. Era interrupted their conversation. He replied that the third round had already ended, and the participants had disappeared somewhere. The king could not understand what had happened. Coming to his senses, he remembered the red-haired man who had pointed a gun at Yoon. Yoon pointed the gun at him and was ready to give him a sign that would show him that the plan could be carried out. The memory of Rayan pointing a gun at Wukong flashed before his eyes. He understood that the chamber might be empty. It remained to be seen at what point they managed to develop their plan. The Viking was still a danger to the deity. Now his time is up. The king called them names. All 3 stared at the creature, protected by divine armor. Yoon turned to the protagonist and voiced his wish that he would continue to warn him about a possible unpleasant future. The brunette moved forward. Soon the king turned the only weapon he had towards them. The guy dodged, and he attacked the creature in the stomach. Wukong managed to avoid the attack. The guy didn't expect that he had such high speed. The king immediately reached out to Yoon to stop him. Before the king could come to his senses, a bullet flew towards him. The creature dodged. Rayan remained silent. As soon as the king fell on his back, a Viking immediately stopped in front of him. ready to deal with him at any moment. The warrior was ready to kill. His power has increased significantly. Rayan watched their battle in the water. He wondered who had given him such power. Wukong turned out to be quicker and managed to escape. Yun also didn't see the enemy anywhere. Only some insect loomed in front of him. Divine power allowed him to predict his movements. He wanted to eliminate him first. Rayan didn't let go of the pistol. Everything around him seemed very suspicious. The macaque also tensed up. The protagonist successfully repelled the attack. The guy didn't understand how he could cope with such speed. Wukong easily repelled his attacks, but he sensed the power of a higher god in his opponent. The macaque stopped. Yun attacked Wukong with his foot. Then he had to dodge the attack. Rayan wanted to know if his partner was okay, and he said that his only wish was to get out of this place alive. Viking responded that the team should not agree to conditions that do not suit them. Wukong replied that he saw their hidden abilities and talents. Therefore, they have to get out of here. If they understand how their abilities work, they will not leave the gods alone. Rayan wanted to discuss a plan with Yun that would lead to victory. His divine power is omniscience. Of course, knowing the future is not safe. If in this case he acted in such a way that he knows the future, then most likely the future will change. He saw the consequences of his actions. And it's also not difficult to understand what the shot will lead to. He needed to see all available branches of events. But the king had a different plan. He immediately realized that they were preparing some kind of plan. Yun said that so far, out of everyone they've fought, they have the coolest powers. The Viking replied that because they behaved like this, things would only get worse. Besides, this is not a party to entertain each other like that. Rayan wanted to ask a question, but the Viking sent him away. The guys were not satisfied. There was a chance that someone would definitely listen to him. Then any future can be changed. It is not entirely clear which of them will decide such issues. They are impudent little people who didn't stand a chance against them. Rayan shouted that he was also part of the god in the game. Wukong cast a spell. The Viking was immediately paralyzed. He tried to get out. The boys rushed to attack him. The king easily repelled the attack of both boys. The battle began in earnest. Rayan immediately materialized a glaive. He attacked again. Yun also decided to arm himself, at least with a pistol, and help his partner defeat the king of the macaques. The guy grabbed the gun, and he aimed it right at the target. Yun almost got punched in the face. There was no way he could make it. Rayan used the glaive again to defeat the king. The boys fell to the ground from Wukong's attack. The king shouted at Yun that his eyes were very annoying. The fun could be ruined at any moment. The boys saw a strange inscription in front of them. First, a number of transformations appeared in the air, and then a deity in the form of an elephant appeared. It was of incredible size. The guys looked like ants in comparison to it. The guys were thrown aside. Rayan could barely stay on his feet. The guys couldn't understand who was in front of them and what power he possessed. In the distance, Wukong's silhouette still loomed. The main character could not keep up with the Monkey King. Rayan understood that he could not behave aggressively. Yun immediately decided to activate his divine power. The king could do nothing to oppose them. In addition, 2 warring spirits entered the space. They were the basis of Yun's strength. The guy used the double storm technique. Yun stood on the shore, ready to use all his might in battle against the Monkey King. Wukong replied that the gods would not forgive this so easily. The Viking was slammed into the ground, unable to escape the spell's shackles. Rayan replied that he would cover for him if anything happened. Yun replied that he couldn't fight properly. His speed was something he was really proud of. The brunette quickly moved and tried to make a sweep. The king saw another fist flying towards him, then a kick. There was no way for Wukong to dodge this time. And again, one more blow that would allow him to speed up. The guy got up with him and abruptly threw him down. It turned out that to do this, you need to be faster. The guy attacked the king again, literally not giving him a chance to come to his senses. He managed to repel the counterattack, his divine power activating in time and standing out like armor. Rayan kept his eyes on his partner. Despite the obvious advantage, Yun could need help at any moment. The boy attacked the king again. His strength was far more powerful than any technique Wukong had ever seen before. The king realized that he would have to fight to the limit, and he finally repelled the boy's attack. He took a few steps. The creature waved its staff again. The protagonist's partner was completely absorbed by the power of divine force. The guy couldn't stop, and I was unable to control myself. Yun jumped up and tried to kick the king again. He succeeded and flew to the side a decent distance. The macaque's body crashed into a rock. Yun could barely see from the bird's eye view where exactly he landed. He hoped that macaques didn't know how to land. A divine light appeared in the boy's hands and cut through the air. He transformed his energy into a stream of light, and he directed a powerful stream at the enemy. With such a flow of energy, it was completely impossible to see whether the king was alive or not. Rayan had never seen such a skill in using divine power before. Lightning and wind in one move were impressive. This was the player's true strength. The main character looked at his partner with pride. Wukong still survived. He replied that speed does not always decide, unlike strength, especially if the goal was to destroy a god. The king was impressed that mortals had not fought him like this before. This time, he got a worthy opponent. During the time Yoon has been in the game, he has only been touched by an enemy once. The king could not allow him to just slip away. He grabbed him by the head and slammed him into the ground. In this fight, he was ready to give the primacy to him. Yoon began to remember the past, all the most terrible moments in his life that he had experienced. He remembered his school years when he was humiliated, and the pain he felt from not being like others. How he lacked the strength to fight back and prove that he too deserved to be treated normally. At that time, he felt cut off from the rest of society. This moment determined his future life. As a boy, he decided to do everything to ensure that no one would ever harm him again. The first moment he used power flashed through his mind. As he grew older, he could already stand up for himself. Life forced him to defend himself with force. No one dared to humiliate him anymore. There were problems in high school, and at one point 17 people were hospitalized because of him. Of course, the director could not forgive this. From that moment on, he no longer saw the difference between good and evil, just as he didn't see the difference between the strong and the weak. At that time, he saw his future as successful and prosperous. Strength and intelligence protected him. Unfortunately, some memories just can't be gotten out of your head. He still remembered the reason why he received the burn that separated him from the world of normal people, dividing his life into before and after. At this time, Kayla was in the third-level cave. She wanted to discuss with another player, Yuna. There was a little boy next to her. They hadn't been close before, so there was a lot she didn't know. She wondered where his eyes got such power from. Yun continued to fight with King Wukong. The creature was merciless. It wanted to completely destroy the player. There was an explosion and everything around was engulfed in flames. The Viking was still bound by the spell. Rayan barely managed to stay on his feet. The fire began to dissipate. The main character had to do something. He saw Yun. It seemed that after such an attack it was impossible to stay alive. The king did not wait to see what would happen next. He launched another attack. Seeing that his opponent was barely standing on his feet, he decided that he would not give him the opportunity to defeat him. The king wanted to win by cunning. It seemed like Yun had done everything to make sure no one could touch him again. After all, he gave himself his word. Wukong frowned with displeasure. The guy understood that his whole life he had been focused on preserving his life and not letting anyone get close to him. He turned to the king and said that he had no idea how many gods were sponsoring him. The king froze in surprise. He already had 2 warlike patrons, deities, Raijin and Fujin. But he had no idea yet who else might be helping this mortal. Yun was ready to tell him the secret. Wukong was stunned when the boy said that he had the protection of 9 gods, for whom a king like him meant nothing. The main character didn't take his eyes off Yun. The guy could need him at any moment. The Viking also heard about the number of gods, and the thought flashed through his mind that he could win. Yun wasn't going to just leave the game. He had a mission, revenge. He remembered how his game began. His goal was to kill his father. No one dared to stand in his way. The king said he was giving him one last chance to answer the question. Yun asked his signature question about eye color. It remained to be seen why such players should have been left alive. Besides, each of them suffered. It took resilience to endure all the difficulties. Each of them had their own interest in this game. Yun was consumed with revenge. All that was left for him to do was to use divine power. He used a technique called the Lord of the Nile. Plants emerged from the earth and bound the king. Then he tried another trick. This time, he used another form of divine power. He then sent lightning and wind at Wukong, which intertwined in one blow. The creature was pierced by the power of several gods. This time it had no chance to survive. Such an attack could not be withstood by one person alone. Yun was upset that the king was still alive. This meant only one thing, that he stood on the same level as the other gods. It took him a few seconds to respond blow for blow. The king quickly climbed onto the pole, which a second ago was just a staff, and attacked the guy. Since he couldn't cope alone, there was nothing left to do but make copies of himself. The copies were even more evil than the king himself. Rayan saw that they looked different. Whether it was an illusion or a real thing, Yun didn't yet understand. But he couldn't allow any of them to come close. Divine power had to help him. He unleashed a fiery hurricane again. However, one of the copies turned out to be much more agile. The clone turned out to be faster than the guy expected. Several more illusions began to surround him. Rayan was puzzled as to where they got such strength from. Yun decided that no one could handle this task better than his warlike deities. The king was burning with rage and desire to destroy his enemy. However, the guy didn't give his copies the opportunity to even approach him. It's strange that none of the illusions have said a word yet. Yun looked at him, hoping that he would miss and not have to waste the power of the gods again for nothing. The opponents attacked each other simultaneously, each of them receiving a backhand to the jaw. Yun flew high. Rayan wanted to approach him and ask how he was. However, the guy only started trolling the king. The creature spat out half of its teeth, and he replied that this fight was one of the most unusual. Rayan ran up to Yun and said that they needed to come up with a plan. There were too many copies. The brunette was angry. He wanted to deal with him, and immediately. The hero saw that the guy was consumed by a thirst for revenge and battle. and this could be dangerous for everyone. The Viking also still could not escape from the influence of the spell. Most likely, the strongest one could turn the tide of the battle. Immediately, the main character had the idea that if he changes something, then most likely they will have another option for the development of events. The main character did not expect such a turn of events. He wanted to use the gun. I pulled out the drum, and there were still cartridges left inside it. Then he pointed the gun towards the Viking. Yun didn't immediately understand what was happening. He decided that the main character wanted him dead in any case. When a gun was pointed at you, you couldn't think about anything else. Wukong also did not immediately understand what was happening and what the matter was. The warrior was prepared for any outcome, but he did not want to die just like that. Rayan decided that he would not allow anyone to take away his right to choose. All hope was that the bullet would be much faster than he was. The Viking didn't even move a muscle. He was so unwavering. King Wukong was enraged, and it was this rage that could give him the strength to continue fighting. His spell was broken. He needed to do something urgently. Rayan told the macaque to watch his weapon. Any god could dodge a bullet. The main character also managed to see the most likely outcome of events. Finally, the participant could have fun in battle from the heart. However, even a serious guy like Vidar wanted to stretch his muscles in a fight. The king replied that he would not allow them to destroy him anyway. A second later, he cast a spell. Yun was ready to activate his power even though he was injured. Rayan stopped him easily with his hand. First of all, it was necessary to get rid of all clones and copies. The Viking didn't listen to them and moved forward. The macaques were already preparing to attack and were moving towards him. Vidar immediately focused on the divine power. One of the most reliable techniques is the hand of God. He clasped his palms in front of him and pointed his hands towards his opponents. The copies stopped for a second. Vidar's power not only frightened them with its strength, but also blinded them with its light. Wukong was extremely pleased with what was happening. He didn't want anyone to disturb him and break his spell. However, the devastating attack could no longer be stopped. Yun looked at the Viking and said that he had never seen such a cool warrior before. The power of a god was concentrated in Vidar's palms, but Yun did not yet understand which one. Once the dust from the attack settled, a huge tunnel and what remained of the plane appeared before him. The protagonist remembered his partner's instructions regarding this player he was worth fearing. Vidar was not just a warrior, he was the protector of God himself. And of course he was a deity and not of the lowest rank. Yun couldn't understand how such an uncouth boor could fight on par with him. He had never encountered such power before. Rayan quickly realized that he had to drive carefully, otherwise he could quickly become dead. A memory of the cross and of God arose in his mind. Yuna was overcome with a feeling of injustice because of the Viking's strength and what merits he had earned such power. The Viking didn't pay any attention to his words. He was used to trusting only himself in this game. Besides, he hadn't really fought anyone yet, although he understood that anyone could become his opponent in this game. Wukong watched them from above. He had no other options. Now that all three of them have shown him their talents, it will be easier for him to fight knowing what they are capable of. The king immediately realized that before him stood a northern god who had a sponsor. Such players and creatures were usually untouchable. Yun was also one of them. To the king, Rayan was nothing more than a scoundrel who could see into the future. Wukong decided that one of them was definitely worthy of protecting him. He couldn't wait to destroy the rest. The protagonist began to think about a plan that could somehow improve the situation. Besides, he couldn't cope alone. They had to combine their forces. Vidar agreed. But his instinct told him that he shouldn't team up with them. Anything could be expected from these players, so he had to be careful. Yun reminded the guys that the team would not be complete without him. The protagonist was ready to give it his all. However, there was one nuance that confused him. He couldn't forget what happened to his partner. Their main goal remained the desire to get out of here. Wukong just laughed. He had never met such stubborn mortals before. The creature immediately jumped down towards them. What he most wanted to use was a technique called expansion. His staff immediately turned into a pole, which he could use as a weapon in battle. The Viking tried to stop him, but the boys started running in the other direction. Then they turned sharply and pounced on the king of the macaques. Yun rushed towards the king. He immediately used a light strike. Rayan materialized his weapon, still holding the glaive. The king blocked his blow with his staff. The guy was extremely surprised. The brunette turned his attention to the Viking. Vidar was already flying to help the boys. He couldn't leave them alone in the battle. Yun also teamed up with Rayan. Still, the Viking's blow was much stronger. A feeling of pain pierced the king from within. The Viking attacked him with a stream of air that literally rubbed him down to the bone, and threw it aside a decent distance. The force of the blow was such that he immediately pierced the rock with his body. The guys wanted to catch him, but there was still a chance that he would escape. The protagonist decided that it was time to defeat him right now. There may not be another moment. The king decided to head towards them as quickly as possible. He felt that they were afraid. Their hearts were pounding. They had no other choice. The Viking assumed a stance that would allow him to block the blow. Wukong attacked the Viking with a kick to the stomach. Vidar felt that the king's power had become much stronger than before. Yun, seeing what the Viking had received from the king, rushed to attack the enemy. However, Wukong was much more agile. The king immediately hit the guy with a pole. The guy fell to the ground. No one had ever dared to even touch him before, let alone hit him. The creature looked at the guy sarcastically. At this time, the main character armed himself and pointed a gun at him. Rayan hoped that this god was not faster than a bullet. Suddenly, Wukong jumped up and tried to attack Rayan with his foot. The guy realized that the gun was unloaded. He was sure that there was still at least one bullet in the cylinder that he could count on. The guy was thrown several meters. The weapon also jumped out of his hands. The flame of hope they had clung to would soon be completely lost. The king was pleased that he had disposed of all three so quickly. He decided to tell Rayan that he would deal with him first. Wukong could not leave alive the one who sees the future. The creature asked why he had not seen his plan then. Rayan didn't understand what he could answer in such a situation. It was important to understand how to prevent him from leading people. Plus, they were the center of attention. The hero made another accurate shot. The king did not understand how this happened. At this time, the girl who dropped out of the round due to the game of roulette woke up. A creature with a scythe, which she had never seen before, appeared before her. It looked terrifying. She had never seen anything like it before. And a moment later, it spoke to her. The creature was ready to offer her a chance to return to the game. It turned out that death itself was offering her a divine contract. Immediately, the girl remembered Rayan, and the way the game ended for her. She didn't know whether she was dead or not, but at that moment, she felt only a strong desire to get up. It was the divine power of death itself. The contract with the sponsor gave her the opportunity to continue playing. At this time, the guys continued to fight. Through the hole in the wall they had made, Aya saw them, continuing to fight as she returned to the game. She turned her attention to the Viking. Then she pulled the bullet out of her head. She saw the gun, which appeared next to her just in time. Now the girl could continue the game. She pointed the barrel of the gun towards the place where the fight was taking place. Then she smiled contentedly. For her, this was an opportunity to kill a god. The bullet hit King Wukong right in the chest. The creature wheezed. Rayan didn't immediately understand what had happened. The king just started to wheeze. The main character smiled. Wukong felt that there was someone else nearby. The guy immediately pointed the gun towards the king. He lowered his head and said out loud that only a pistol could win any fight. He remembered Vidar, who also survived, and the girl, the only one on whom the roulette game ended. He used the rest of his bullets to confuse the enemy. Besides, destroying the power of the gods is a difficult task. The gun flew out of the protagonist's hands. Rayan decided that he had not wasted his only bullet for nothing. Aya smiled and reminded the boy about the bullet that caused her death. Wukong screamed that he had never seen them before. The hero replied that it was not for nothing that he received the gift of foresight from God. He recalled the moment when they played Russian roulette. The various branches of the future became clearly visible to him. Thanks to this, he was able to make the right choice. Even before the game that the king started, the guy was worried about the girl. An incredible smile lit up his face. Rayan didn't want to risk anything. He still had hope that the girl would not be scared. It seemed that everything was going according to someone's plan. The protagonist had no plans to retreat. The Viking was ready to activate his power at any moment. Yun was ready in case his help was needed. The king shouted that one bullet would not be enough. The guys decided to act together. Yun shouted that one crushing blow could take down this macaque. Rayan was a little surprised. A few seconds passed before the other deities appeared. The boys didn't expect to find themselves surrounded by gods on all sides. The girl smiled. Wukong was unhappy with what happened. A few more seconds passed before a god appeared in the sky. God was angry. Wukong immediately remembered the moment when it all began. He strove for freedom. The king was in captivity for a long time. He knew he couldn't just get out. Now he had other plans for eternity. From that moment on, he fought without ceasing. The fighting just couldn't seem to end. Soon, he managed to achieve freedom. The supreme god ruined all plans, and also the one who watched him for so long. The voice of God resounded throughout the plain. He recalled that when Wukong first became a deity, no one had any idea who he was. Only after hundreds of battles did he manage to prove that he was worthy of entering the pantheon of gods. At some point he stopped fighting monsters, and he began to fight with other deities. Then a question arose in his head. After so much time, he did not understand why he should continue fighting. At some point, it stopped, and there was an explosion. The shockwave began to spread rapidly. It seemed as if she was going out of reach. Each new battle became more difficult. This could not go on for long. The supreme deity made it clear to him that he no longer wished to control him. Rayan did not expect that the creator himself would appear before him. The guy turned his attention to the deity the god instilled terror. Moreover, he could not see his future, which in itself was no less frightening. Yun said that there was no point in expecting help from the pantheons. One of them heard an insult from a mortal and started to make a scene. Anubis was very interested in what he would say about his stay in the game. After all, the game could end at any moment for the deity. Vidar did not want to communicate with gods who did not patronize him. Anubis was outraged by this attitude. He had never encountered such a smug attitude before. Moreover, It was with this god that he had long-standing scores to settle. Nearby, Rayan noticed a cartridge lying peacefully on the ground. While the supreme god was surveying the area, Master Era reminded him that he had to move the players. God smiled slightly. He saw the solution to the situation in something else, and he wanted his players to see everything with their own eyes. There and then, he decided to explain to them what was happening, and he decided to remind them that they were obliged to treat him with respect. Several gods appeared before the hero, whom he had never seen before. One of them turned to Wukong. He wanted to know how exactly they got here. The king was very scared. His eyes were filled with horror. It seemed that he recognized the one who was in front of him. Once he was an integral part of them, they moved along the path together, but now, everything has changed. The king raised his head and shouted for the god to stop. Yun thought that this game should have ended earlier. The creator replied that they had done nothing wrong. God decided that it would be best if he showed them his power. One of them suddenly developed a swollen head. A moment later, the heads of all three exploded. The sight was bloody. Parts of brains flew everywhere, and the three bodies fell dead. At this time, the guys stood and watched what was happening. They didn't yet know whether to intervene or not. The girl saw such a terrible sight for the first time. The deity accused everyone of forcing him to do this. Wukong refused to understand the supreme god. Tears slowly flowed down his cheeks. God was adamant. Everyone understood perfectly well that everything depended on him, and who can take them away in a matter of seconds. Everything depended solely on the whim of the creator himself. The people crowded in front of the decapitated bodies. They did not understand what to do next, because one of them could have ended up in their place. Rayan was surprised when he saw several more gods. Yun thought they died too quickly, considering they were gods. The Viking was also surprised, because he thought that the gods were immortal. And besides, this time they could afford to kill each other. The creator wanted to show the gods his strength and power. Wukong realized why God had started all this. He wanted to say something, but not a single thought came to mind. He just wanted freedom. But instead, he got something completely different. They also didn't tell him why they treated him like that after everything. Wukong gritted his teeth in resentment and anger. What he wanted most was for this creature to materialize. At this time, Zeus appeared, with lightning bolts in his hands, as expected. He didn't keep Wukong waiting long and threw lightning at him. The king stopped abruptly. What happened next surprised everyone. Suddenly, the king turned around and with incredible speed grabbed the lightning that was flying at his back. His eyes were filled with fury like a wild animal. Several gods from other pantheons saw that he had caught Zeus's power in mid-air. Zeus also did not expect such a turn of events. The Lord of Lightning could not believe that some monkey had harnessed his power and dared to humiliate him in front of the other deities. Wukong hoped he had sent the lightning to its destination. Vidar and Yun tried to put up a block to somehow protect themselves from the blow that was flying towards them. Several gods were already flying towards the king. Wukong immediately created several copies of himself, which took the blows of the gods. One of them was surprised that the king could do this. However, the clone successfully protected the king from him. The next one aimed his fist at the face of another deity. The blow was so strong that the creature was thrown back several meters. Another copy joined the other, and they began to finish off the god. Wukong decided to object to God. Anubis and Poseidon thought about it. They had never thought about opposing the supreme god before. But they also didn't want to feel like slaves who would unquestioningly obey all his orders. The king wanted to remind them of the time when they had the opportunity to peacefully coexist and rule together. Master Era remained tactfully silent. The boys also thought about the king's speech. The king decided that he had had enough this time. The supreme god never deigned to descend from the heavens, even to his own kind, let alone walk on the earth he created. Wukong felt his anger grow even stronger. The king said that he would do his utmost to destroy it. God decided that this time he should remain silent. A moment later, he turned to the master and asked him to lead the participants to the waiting room. Era approached him. Rayan turned to Yun. He did not think about the meaning of the game and the gods. He didn't even notice the main character right away. Yun was frustrated and angry that he couldn't change anything in this game. Era approached the participants and asked them to follow him. The master snapped his fingers and apologized. The guys began to dissolve. This is an effect typical of teleportation. The girl also felt the effect of the movement, and Era suggested that she rest in the restroom and wait for instructions. Finally, the master threw a phrase in their direction, telling them to wait for further instructions. The deity raised its head upward. He even felt sorry for a moment that everything ended so quickly. Then the creator asked Eru to make the other deities leave on their own. The master needed a few minutes to think. Wukong realized that his existence was now under threat. The supreme god wished to erase it. Era snapped his fingers, and he asked the creator not to accidentally destroy other kingdoms in the process. Wukong watched closely what was happening. Then he said that a duel wouldn't be the worst option. The creator replied that there would be no one to stop him. Its power was too great, as its creator believed. God dreamed of this chance from the very beginning. One day came when he did what others could not do. At this moment, Wukong decided to go against the game. Then he was overcome with rage. His faith in balance was shaken. However, this feeling gave him enormous power. Rayan didn't know what to do next. The teleport worked. They found themselves in some strange place. Yun turned to the protagonist. He wanted to know the reason why he stopped him. It was at that moment that he had the opportunity to act in a completely different way. He understood that Wukong was their enemy, but still, the game moved them as it wanted. More than anything in the world, he wanted to stop this creature. Much of what they could do was beyond his reach. Yun also confirmed the Vikings' words that they were tied hand and foot. Now he was wondering what to do with the girl. He sincerely believed that she was simply pretending to be dead. The girl pretended to be dead to save her skin. Yun wasn't sure he could trust her. She began to convince the guys that she could be trusted. The girl smiled. She wanted to change the subject. Rayan wanted to consult with the Viking. Vidar immediately realized that she was being sponsored by death itself. Still, he had doubts about whether he should trust her. In this game, everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. The guy tried to reach out his hands to the girl. The protagonist thought that they needed to unite rather than argue. Finally, he became interested in the girl's name. Her name was Aya. Rayan wanted to somehow thank her for helping them in the battle. He had a desire to take her into the team and go through the next round together. The girl extended her hand. He shook it. Suddenly, something confused the girl. The main character began to smile evilly. It seemed like the wait in that room would last forever. The room was located in a house that stood on the water. Finally, the players left the house. What they wanted most was to rest. The guy stopped. Aya looked at him with her charming blue eyes. Suddenly, an aura appeared around her that was associated with death. The boys took a few steps forward. Rayan immediately realized that this was not just a coincidence. She thought that she should stay away from such people. Aya understood that people like him only cared about themselves. They betrayed others when it suited them. However, there was no point in playing alone. And the Supreme God was also dangerous and cunning. With each round, teamwork became more and more difficult. To get this far, a whole plan had to be devised. Soon Kayla appeared. Shinnigan was also standing nearby. Rayan recognized him immediately. Finally, he saw her. A fair-haired girl entered the room. When the girl saw the main character, she burst into tears of happiness. Everything inside her was rejoicing. She was so happy to see him that she immediately rushed into his arms. It was so sudden that he didn't even expect it. She hugged him tightly. She became afraid that something had happened to him. Rayan was more glad that she was safe. At this time, Shinnigan came out to them. He was very curious about what had happened to him. The protagonist replied that it was a very long story. Shinnigan replied that he had changed a lot. The guy didn't expect that he would answer like that. He was terribly curious about the reason why he reacted like that. He smiled. Before they went further, they wanted to do something. Rayan wanted to introduce someone to them. At this time, in the ice, one of the gods fell from the mountain peaks. An unknown creature was rushing towards him. This deity turned out to be Wukong. He climbed onto his cloud and continued the fight. The opponent in front of him wanted to know what else he was capable of. The king was surprised that his enemy said so many words. He raised the pole up and yelled. His scream was terrible and terrifying. His staff began to emit an unknown but very powerful energy. He managed to hold back the blow. The king could not figure out what to do next. The deity said he was too arrogant. He immediately used several clones to repel the attack. The supreme god stopped him immediately, and I told him that he was definitely being unreasonable. Then he directed a powerful stream of energy at it. God immediately stopped him with another blow. He felt like he was absolutely ready for anything. The creator looked closely at the king of macaques. A second later, one of the spears struck back at the king. However, he managed to block his blow. They clashed in a fight that was unmatched in power. The creature flew an incredible distance. All thoughts were occupied only with fighting with all their might. The king clearly stated his intention to fight only with the main character. After all, he is the only one, after the creator himself, who could see the future. Wukong smiled slyly. When the fog cleared, the king said he had a right to know what would happen next. The creator quipped that he was not a king, but just a primate. Besides, Buddha was right about monkeys being too cunning and smart. Before the king had time to come to his senses, the god began to attack him again. He used his almighty hand to punish the negligent god. Wukong was prepared for his wrath, but it seemed he needed to activate all his strength and power. The hand hit the target right on target. The king did not want to be blown away by the wind. He immediately remembered the move that the Viking had demonstrated last time. The god's blow was very similar in strength to his blow. Such power could only belong to a god. He could not believe that all his efforts and labors would disappear along with him. Wukong raised his head and saw the Buddha. God found it amusing that such an insignificant creature was trying to fight, knowing that with such power it would simply be impossible to resist. Although, at the same time, there was another creature that could compare with him in strength. This was supposed to decide the outcome of the battle. Wukong immediately realized that the Buddha had supported him and shared some of his power with him. He would never give her away just like that, especially to such a cunning and selfish god. Wukong immediately dropped to one knee, making it easier for him to concentrate. In their last meeting, the Buddha's follower told him that no matter how many followers he had, or how many gods supported him, true strength did not lie in physical superiority. At that moment, the king was deeply touched by his words. It seemed as if they had reached his very heart. He wanted everything to be done with honor. It was this deity that inspired him and made him move along his own, albeit not easy path. Wukong suddenly screamed that he would never accept the power of such an arrogant and selfish god. The creator coldly responded that those who disagreed with him should be erased forever. He wished that his story would end there. It would have cost him nothing to destroy him. But even such power, Wukong could withstand. Buddha showed him his power. However, the king had a goal. He wanted to save his friends at any cost, and free them from this ridiculous game. It was this goal that gave him the strength to fight on. Even if he doesn't succeed in this life, he will try to do everything possible for them in the next. All that was left for him now was to fight to the end. He still believed that he had to continue this battle with the creator. Wukong felt like a titan, with the entire weight of the universe on his shoulders. The supreme god felt this energy. He had never seen anyone withstand the Buddha's hand before, and possess even the same strength to move it. Wukong began to rise from his knees, continuing to move his palm towards the sky. Blood flowed down his face, but the smile did not leave his face. He announced that his divine power and protection would belong only to the new champion, and he would never allow the current one to have his abilities and powers taken away against his will. The king recognized Rayan Usur as the new champion, and demanded the same from the others. At this time, the protagonist felt as if he heard a call. King Wukong had no plans to give up, no matter what happened. Even though he was half buried in magma, he still tried to overcome the power of the Buddha. The creator was offended that some pathetic primate did not recognize him, even after everything he's done for this damn game. Wukong's strength was waning. It seemed that in a second the palm would crush him. The last thing he wanted to tell this world was that he had no regrets. His life's journey turned out to be an amazing adventure for him. Even the last minutes of his life were worth continuing to fight. He believed that the search for freedom would not end in this existence. He could only hope that there was someone in this universe who could share his goal. His instinct told him that somewhere there was another creature that could continue his path. Of course, they were talking about Rayan Asura, and the guy clearly felt that a great battle for freedom was taking place between the strongest. Finally, the palm practically pressed the king into the ground, like an ant. At that moment, the planet shook. A powerful stream of energy, like lightning, penetrated every centimeter of space, destroying the earth. Rayan stood rooted to the spot. He couldn't explain what he felt. Physically, his body was in a completely different place than his consciousness. His allies approached him, and the girl felt that something was wrong with him. The guy turned to her. She saw that tears were flowing from his clear, divine eyes. He needed a couple of seconds to come to his senses. He needed to answer something to his friends. He couldn't find anything better to do than blame it all on fatigue from a hard day. The guy looked at his hands. At this time, the Supreme God and Wukong found themselves in open universal space. The protagonist clenched his hand tightly. He was ready for decisive action. The Supreme Deity looked closely at his palm. The participants were still in another space and awaiting further instructions. The creator had to make a decision. He would never allow anyone to take his place, and he certainly wouldn't trust his universe to some boy. Soon, a table with decorations and food appeared in front of the players. The boys sat down at the table and began to eat. Enio asked the main character what happened. The girl wanted to quickly enter into battle with the gods. Rayan was very grateful that his team did not abandon him. A boy sat down next to Yun and was enthusiastically playing something. He really wanted to see what he was doing, but the boy stopped him with the phrase that he was too old to interfere in his affairs. Yun was surprised that such a young player made it through several rounds. He replied that it was his fault. He wanted to be sure that the child would be able to find a common language with the team. The main character could not come to his senses. Enio suggested discussing plans for the next round. Rayan replied that he had no idea what awaited them next. The girl agreed with him. It seemed that she had no other option. Suddenly, Rayan materialized a weapon. The team was surprised. A second later, there was a knock on the door. The protagonist frowned, because in this place one could expect anything from anyone. Since the protagonist was armed, he decided that it would be better if he met the uninvited guest himself. His hand touched the handle. The judge appeared in front of him and looked very worried. However, Rayan was incredibly happy to see her. Yun couldn't help but want to know what happened to the eye patch as soon as he saw it. The judge exhaled and said that she expected nothing else from an idiot like him. This question immediately brought back to her mind the memory of the moment when she lost her eye. Of course, she didn't want to discuss this with anyone. The protagonist asked her the reason for her appearance. She replied that a difficult test awaited them. There was little time. A new round awaited them in 2 days. The girl told them that there were healing elixirs in one of the rooms. The judge was interrupted by a brunette who wanted to ask questions. Of course, the judge didn't plan to stand on ceremony with her. The judge asked those present how well they knew the Greek pantheon of gods, as they were about to face a test related to the labyrinth of Minos. She immediately came to her senses, because in front of her stood the participants whose memories had been erased before participating in the game. There will be no winners in the next round, nor will there be any teams. Only those who dare to survive will remain. Rayan looked closely at the judge. To get through the labyrinth, you need to gather in groups of several people. Monsters and incredible challenges will await them in the labyrinth. To complete this quest, they will have to go alone, or, on the contrary, team up with others. However, staying in the labyrinth can be addictive. Shinigin wanted to know what the time frame was for this round. The judge chuckled. Then she announced a deadline of 4 days. The protagonist didn't expect it to last so long. Plus, this is the only round where they won't be forced to kill each other. Rayan's team tensed up. They felt like there had to be a catch somewhere. The judge looked down and said that the issue was about almost 200,000 participants. However, only 1,000 of them will be able to pass the round. Those who remain alive will be fed to the observer. The conversation was about the Minotaur. It was this creature that guarded the labyrinth. Rayan immediately realized that he was Tauros' sponsor. The judge said this was the briefing for the 4th round. She decided to give them one memory. She needed to use force. Just in case, the main character was ready to activate his own. The judge said it was more than just a memory. It was a reason to live on. All 8 participants crowded in front of her. The protagonist raised his head. It seemed as if reality had broken into many pieces, and a house appeared before him. He found himself in this place for the first time. It was rainy and quite late. He instantly had the feeling that his loved ones were somewhere nearby. He was ready to do anything to see them again. Rayan looked at himself, only much younger. He couldn't believe that in front of him was his little copy. A figure appeared in front of him and took a few steps. The main character looked around and saw a figure nearby walking towards him. A girl was walking towards him. She was covered in blood. The armor she was dragging behind her finally fell. She saw a guy in front of her, but she didn't pay any attention to him. He realized that only a monster could do such a thing. The girl walked up to the small copy of Rayan and gently placed her hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him down. The girl came closer and sat down next to him. The boy did not immediately realize that it was Ichika in front of him. More than anything in the world, he wanted to know why his parents were killed. Mom and Dad were a simple family of farmers. My brother was only 5. The main character wanted to know why they died. Ichika hugged the child tightly, but to be honest, she was scared herself. But she couldn't say anything at all. This world is too cruel and unfair. Tears also rolled down her cheeks from the realization that her life had changed. Now, they have no chance to be normal for this world. The girl asked her brother to hide in a safe place. Then she told him what to do if he didn't return in a few hours. All that remained was to find Grandma. After that, Ichika picked up the knife again. Rayan tried to stop his sister, but she had to move on. She couldn't just leave him here. Tears started flowing from the boy's eyes, and he didn't try to hold them back, because tears are a sign of humanity, not weakness. However, the sister did not utter a word. She knew that now everything had lost its meaning for both of them. There was a glimmer of hope in her that her brother would be able to understand and forgive her. Ultimately, they all faced death. It was just a matter of time. Ichika approached the adult Rayan and reminded him of why he was in this place. Then the girl turned around and left them. The guy felt uneasy. He had never experienced anything like this before. There was no one closer to him than his sister. She was always there in difficult times. And it seemed that nothing could separate them. It remains to be seen what happened up to this point. Several warriors celebrated their victory. One of them approached a young general named Taro, although from now on, it would be easier for him if he didn't call him that. A second later, a metal arrow flew into the blonde's neck. The general did not immediately realize what had happened. The warriors immediately became alarmed. Years of making memories, honing skills, building connections, relationships and friendships, all for nothing. All of this now made absolutely no sense. Ichika approached the general and asked what the value of human life was for a warrior. And is there any reason to live with the general after what he did to innocent people? The general had never seen this girl before. She introduced herself as his victim. Then she took out a knife, and she suddenly began to attack. The general ordered his soldiers to do everything to keep him alive. The girl's eyes suddenly lit up. It was similar to the abilities that the main character possessed. The girl began to move with amazing speed and dexterity. The daimyo warriors were considered skilled warriors, which allowed them to control a large part of the country's territory. Some mystical power awakened in Ichika. A second later, armed with a knife, she was already moving towards another warrior. She quickly managed to defeat several more. It remained to be hoped that she would be able to deal with the archer. However, one of the daimyo's boys shot an arrow at the girl. Her reaction was lightning fast. She managed to dodge and run in the other direction, passing the trajectory along which the arrow flew. The warrior became indignant. The arrow suddenly changed its trajectory. The man was surprised. He had never seen such tricks before. The girl had no choice but to swing the knife. A moment later, another warrior was defeated. Ichika took a few steps. The general had seen eyes like the girl's somewhere before. He only had to remember where exactly. She was very determined. However, the sound of a sword was heard behind him. There was literally a second left before the impact. Suddenly the girl lunged to the side. Little Rayan pounced on the warrior. He furiously grabbed him by the armor and began to beat him with his bare hands. The general never expected to see a child. At this time, the adult version of the main character watched what was happening. He felt guilty about what was happening. There was tension in the air as the blade pierced human flesh. The boy screamed that if it weren't for him, his parents would still be alive. He wanted them to feel the same as he did. All he cared about now was revenge. Ichika allowed her brother to deal with this bastard, although she understood that their parents could not be resurrected from their death. The general needed a couple of seconds to decide what to do with them. The warriors crowded together and looked down on this whole spectacle. The boy could not calm down, and continued to injure the already dead body. Suddenly his sister grabbed his wrist. Ichika tried to explain to her brother that nothing could be done in this situation. The boy replied that he did not want to be left alone. The warrior replied that they would kill anyone. The boy looked at his sister, tears streaming down his cheeks. At that moment, more than anything in his life, he wanted them to get what they deserved for what they had done to his family. Ichika felt proud of her brother. Despite what he had done, such behavior should not have deserved encouragement. Still, she knew that her brother would disobey her request and not remain safe. She understood perfectly well that such a smart boy would easily find his way back. Suddenly, the general hit the girl and she began to lose consciousness. The boy was very scared for his sister. One of the warriors grabbed the guy, twisted his arms and pressed him hard to the floor. The boy tried to free himself and find out what was wrong with his little sister. The girl was unconscious. Rayan screamed that he would kill the general if something happened to her. The general took the cross in his hands. The boy ordered him not to touch their things, otherwise he would destroy it. However, his words had no effect on the leader. The warrior who was holding the boy down tightly replied that it would be better to kill the brat. The general wanted to use both of them for his own purposes. He wanted to ask the guy a couple of questions. The stupidest question he could ask was about faith. The boy thought that he was making fun of them. This made him even more angry. The rest of the warriors wanted to know whether it was about one god or several. Immediately, the general noticed that there was someone standing outside, and that this someone looked very much like a boy. The general immediately assumed that there were several gods or pantheons at the same time, but it was still unknown what they controlled and how they acted. The protagonist looked sternly at the enemy besides. Only a real monster could ask such suspicious questions to a child, in order to undermine faith and break a person. He immediately understood that the point was that lies and God could be one and the same. Soon they found themselves in a hut. The main character was with his little copy inside. The boy was shackled. He was scared. The last thing he wanted was to be alone. The hut looked more like a prison, and a guy stood in front of him. He hadn't seen his sister for over a week. The guy from the next cell said that someone like him should definitely have pride. He asked the boy if he wanted to eat, realizing that the child might be hungry. Then I explained to him that if he wanted to get his lunch, he needed to stop being hysterical. The guy told him that his quiet life was over, and he would have to live in different conditions. If he wants to survive, he must be useful in this place too. In this situation, he is a prisoner who was left alive by the daimyo's warriors, only to control the prophet. The boy squatted down and said that his sister was a divine prophet. From the moment they got her, they started winning every battle. It was the warriors who benefited from using her for their own purposes. They needed her gift of foresight. The boy couldn't believe that his sister had such great power. However, he did not refuse food. The guy expressed doubts about Ichika's abilities, but he hasn't found any confirmation yet. The boy remembered that his sister always supported him. He replied that he had no one closer to Ichika. The boy explained to the child that in order to escape captivity, he would have to try hard. Otherwise, he risked remaining a hostage for the rest of his life. The boy tried to understand what changes were in store for him. Besides, he remembered very well his sister's words that things could no longer be as before. The guy extended his hand to him, and he said that he would tell him what he needed to do to prove his usefulness to these people. Otherwise, he risked remaining in prison for the rest of his life. Rayan replied that he did not understand why a stranger would help him. The guy replied that he understood him perfectly, but tears won't help in this situation. Therefore, there is no point in crying for your sister. Besides, she is alive, and that is the main thing. Besides, the guy couldn't allow the boy to be turned into a tool that the warriors would use for no reason. They shook hands, after which the guy promised that he would help him, although the boy did not understand why a stranger would help him. A couple of seconds later, the main character suddenly found himself in a completely different place. He felt uneasy, and his legs could barely support him. He sank to his knees. The judge was nearby. She wanted to know how he felt about what he remembered. The others also stood there in bewilderment and tried to come to their senses. The Viking also had something to think about. The hero could not believe that all his memories were under control. The judge explained that this was necessary so that they could focus on the next round and not the last one. She was angry that the guy was behaving quite insolently. Asura wanted to know how she controlled their memories. Shinigami intervened and asked Enyo what she thought of the creator. Rayan didn't care about God, he was much more interested in learning something about the judge. For example, where did her eye go? The judge moved abruptly and knocked the guy down. The blonde was afraid to intervene because she was scared. When Asura stood up, the judge slammed him against the wall with all her strength. The divine power within Rayan wanted to know the whole truth, and the reason why she serves the one who took away her eye. He wanted to bargain with her, in the hope that she would return his memory. Then he could take revenge not only for himself and his family. For him, this was the main goal. He wanted to offer the judge a deal in which he could avenge her too. The judge started yelling at the main character because he was acting like a conceited idiot. This time she was ready to forgive him for his insolence. Yun wanted to know what they could do together next. At least Wukong had the courage to fight for what he believed in. The judge got angry. Rayan couldn't believe that Wukong was dead. She explained that the price he paid for standing in God's way was his life. Therefore, she saw no point in wasting time on empty talk. Yun got angry at the judge. As soon as she headed towards the exit, he immediately stopped her. The hero wanted her to pay attention to him. He wanted the judge to do him one favor that would not in any way affect her devotion to her creator. Rayan said that he was very sorry about her losing her eye. The girl gave him 60 seconds to speak. The other players stood nearby but did not approach. Yun couldn't contain his curiosity. Of all those who were in this place, no one else could influence the judge, and even more so, to convince her to go over to their side. The Viking was lost in thought about who would win this game. Everyone had to think for themselves. Although, the one who brought them together and brought them into the game was still unknown to them, Yun decided that nothing was impossible, especially with a partner like Rayan. It remained to be hoped that he would use his gift of persuasion. The team recalled their first meeting. Back then, Rayan was taking no less of a risk now. It was worth thinking about what would happen if the judge took their side. The Viking immediately realized that Rayan was planning to kill the god. The girl hoped it was just a joke. The only way to get out of prison is to kill the warden. Wukong's rebellion against God was unexpected for everyone. They knew that the supreme god controls all other deities. Among them, there are those who do not want to submit to his will and unite with him. One could start by finding these gods and talking to them. Maybe they have a plan. Yun wanted to know what gods Vidar knew. The Viking replied that none of the gods would conflict with the creator, because the future cannot be hidden from him. Vidar said that this is the reason why he ended up in this game. Yun felt cheerful and began to smile. But the Viking reminded him that Asura had already managed to outwit the god once. Perhaps he will be able to do it again. Shinigami watched the others silently. He had nothing to say. Something else worried him. Namely, what happened during the last test, and Wukong's words about how he would have to kill his ally. He remembered the king's words that if Arapak died, he would help him in the further battle. And if he's lucky, he might even become its sponsor. He won't owe him anything for this. Then he thought about his proposal seriously. Shinigami remained silent then. Moreover, he is the only one who saved Iru Park in that round. He had no choice but to draw his sword, and he rushed at the girl, who was unconscious and could not fight back. Despite the king's generous offer, he simply could not kill his comrade. Something stopped him at that moment. The girl didn't even feel the threat that came from him. It seemed like she was just fast asleep. Tears rolled down Shinigami's cheeks. He let go of the sword hilt, and I realized that I couldn't kill someone for my own benefit. Then he gave himself his word that he would never betray anyone again. At that moment, the boy didn't know that the Supreme God was watching him. He had been watching him since the start of the game. Moreover, Shinigami has already stained his hands with blood. In one of the battles, he got hold of one memorabilia. This time, nothing like this was supposed to happen. He wanted to win the game on his own. While Shinigami was thinking, the judge listened to the protagonist's plan. She said she would definitely take time to think about what he said. Rayan was sure that this was her only chance to take revenge, and move on without the control of a despot who has gotten carried away playing the boss. She said she would let me know if she chose a side. Then, the main character made a promise to her, the essence of which will be that she will be able to gain freedom. Shinigami headed towards Rayan. He was eager to find out how the conversation with the judge ended. He needed to find out what the main character's plan was. Rayan thought that this was too presumptuous. He didn't want to reveal all his cards to him. The blonde boy was extremely upset by his answer. The main character did not want a conflict with the team. Suddenly, Era started attacking Yun. It was difficult for Asura to dodge. It seemed that another second and he would miss the blow. Holding a blaster in her hands, the girl decided not to waste time and start training. The main character completely forgot that the next round awaited him, which would be more difficult than the previous ones. The fourth round was the biggest of them all. In this round, they faced trials not for life, but for death. They would have to face monsters and fight each other. But the conditions for them are not defined. Rayan was surprised when he realized that they wanted to fight. The Viking wanted to show his power. As soon as he saw that divine power had awakened within him, he immediately realized that something was wrong. The warrior wanted to fight. Vidar said he wanted to test himself in combat. Besides, such a worthy opponent doesn't come along very often. The Viking noted his physical superiority. Shinigin called him overgrown. At this time, Shinigin approached him and said that he would humiliate him just as he did to him. Rayan was ready to put him in his place. There was a noise in the sky. The Viking was preparing for battle. Now, he thought about this fight with special caution. His knowledge of Shinigin's power and strength was not as great as he thought. However, he would like to keep this secret from outsiders. Asura looked closely at the Viking. He needed to come up with some kind of strategy for the battle. On the other hand, he possessed pure divine power, and he was the strongest of them. He realized that both of them were physically stronger than him. The rest of the team decided to bet among themselves about who would win. Kayla was confused by the number of opponents after all. It was 2 against 1. Yun decided to bet on the Viking. He would easily defeat even more enemies. The brunette intervened and reminded him that the warrior's strength was equal to that of a god, so defeating him would not be easy. Rayan's special features are his brain and eyes, but they won't help if Vidar just uses his power. The outcome will depend on how long Shinigen can hold off Asura in battle. Yun agreed, but Kayla objected that she no longer believed in him. Without a divine power to physically enhance him, he was, in a sense, dependent on his comrades. At this time, the girl looked closely at her teammates. One of the youngest players, deep down, wanted the main character to win. What Yun wanted to know most was what was the reason. The boy replied that he didn't know what had happened. Rayan was just like everyone else, especially on those who win. The Viking banged his fists, and he asked him to show him something that could impress him. For example, the power of one who aims to take the place of the supreme god. The protagonist replied that this was the manifestation of God's power. Vidar said that they didn't know him at all. Rayan concentrated. The Viking immediately pointed his sword at him, and he released all his power. An incredibly powerful energy was directed at him. The girls had never seen anything like it before. Its power was impressive. Yun thought Vidar had held back. Last time he used all his divine power, and she was much bigger. The Viking said the attack was weaker because he used less energy. Yun thought that such a player must definitely have some techniques to control such a powerful force. Vidar was surprised. Shinigin grabbed the protagonist by the hand and pulled him along with him. The boys moved forward together. Shinigin wanted to know if he had confidence that they could handle it. They decided that they would have to go ahead no matter what. The ally asked him not to blame him if he died by accident. Rayan materialized a weapon and headed towards his partner. Vidar was completely defenseless in this position. Shinigin narrowed his eyes. He needed to figure out how to proceed next. The Viking faced a powerful counterattack. His attention quickly turned to the second guy. Shinigin decided to act as quickly as possible. The Viking snapped his fingers. The main character instantly became angry. A powerful stream of light spread around and blinded the warrior. The blondie managed to dodge. However, it became increasingly difficult to resist such an attack. Vidar rushed forward with his fists at the guy. The weapon began to furrow the ground. Vidar and Shinigin clashed in battle. The blonde delivered a crushing uppercut. There was a loud noise from the impact all around. Kayla thought that Shinigin would be able to handle such a strong opponent. The Viking tried to harness the element of air. Rayan grabbed his two-handed sword and decided that it would be more effective to attack from behind. The Viking stopped him. He wanted to know what exactly the protagonist was up to. Rayan replied that in any fight help is needed, but it would be difficult to cope with an opponent with such power. Shinigin knelt down and said that he had no comrades who could protect him. He concentrated all his strength into his fist, hoping that he could deal with it in one blow. Vidar replied that he had expected much more. Asura understood perfectly well that he depended on other people, or rather, the game put him in such conditions that he had to depend on them. What upset him most was that he had to fight against Titan. He felt that his strength was close to the level of a supreme god. The gift of omniscience was available only to those who were confident in the power of the supreme creator. There were several steps that needed to be taken to complete the god game. Asura had to learn to fight on his own. He managed to intercept the Viking's blow. Two forces suddenly collided with each other. Yun tensed up a little. The girl with him didn't expect such a big burst of energy. The rest froze in place and could not find words. Shinigin squatted down. Vidar looked at him carefully. Suddenly, the silhouette of the king of macaques appeared behind him. The protagonist's ally watched the fight. It seemed as if the two deities were in serious conflict. The guy was surprised that he chose such a strong opponent. However, he could not find any worthy reason to keep him alive. At that very moment, he remembered Wukong. The Monkey King, before his death, decided to pass on his power to him. Rayan replied that he recognized him as his champion and gave him the ability to wield his power. This was the last thing he did during the fight with the supreme god. He wanted to find a reason and logic in his actions. But now, it was important for him to use his power. This is exactly how he wanted to win this game. The Viking screamed that he would never let him take the lead in this round. After all, he too is only mortal. After these words, the Viking rushed towards him with his fists. Two divine energies collided with each other. Kayla screamed the main character's name. She didn't know if he would survive such a blow. Asura had to fight to the end. Vidar decided that the barrage of fists would definitely knock him off his feet. Rayan successfully repelled this attack as well. The next moment, he decided to strike him himself. Wukong's divine power looked a little out of place, and perhaps even awkward. He felt sorry that such a strong opponent at first glance looked so pathetic. It would be easy to deal with such an opponent, although he understood that divine power does not go to just anyone. The Viking decided he had to use the hand of God. In a moment, he concentrated all his power into his fist. The main character was able to dodge successfully. Maybe he was just lucky. The next blow was not long in coming. The guy was thrown a decent distance. He couldn't block such a difficult move. His body fell down and landed a few meters from the enemy. The girl saw this and screamed that they had to stop. The Viking understood that he needed to regain his strength, no matter what. However, he didn't expect the guy to still be alive. Rayan replied that he immediately felt a god in him. This already happened in their last fight. The boy replied that the Viking had underestimated him. Vidar was angry that some boy could easily resist him. The hero replied that using half of his strength would not be very wise. Yun watched what was happening with admiration. Moreover, the Viking noticed that he had already used his divine power. Shinigami watched what was happening closely. The girl was also very surprised. Asura decided it was time to show what he had learned. Although, he wanted him to teach him how to use it. The Viking called him a scumbag, who does nothing but throw words around. He was ready to destroy it along with this planet. At this time, Yun intervened. It seems that the fight is no longer so harmless. Yun turned to Vidar, wondering why they were behaving like this. A moment later, the Viking turned to the guy and brushed him off. He gave his word that he would deal with him, no matter what the cost. The guy didn't believe him and asked again. Vidar stared at him. There was a silent question in his eyes. The main character appeared in front of him. Yun wanted to deal with the Viking himself, and as quickly as possible. The guy used a jumping kick. Asura remembered the times when he fought side by side with King Wukong himself. He remembered his behavior in battle, his speed and accuracy of strikes. A silent question arose in Rayan's head. He was wondering why he wasn't reacting to anything. The hero immediately turned to him. Yun lowered his head, puzzled. It took him a few seconds to strike again. If it weren't for Shinigami, Rayan would have been in trouble. The Viking threw a threat towards the guy that he would destroy him at any cost. Shinigami thought that the opponents were too strong, and the protagonist would not be able to cope alone. At the same time, the guy remembered the moment when he chose Asura as his partner. Rayan was then worried that he would be left alone. This time, he couldn't afford a single mistake. Asura remembered his first rounds. He had no right to make a mistake. Then he could simply lose his life. Back then, the boys were on a team and fought as one. A divine aura appeared around Shinigami. His sword glowed, and a whirlwind appeared around him. He remembered why he needed this game. His main goal was to become the winner of this game. Shinigami decided that he must definitely be the winner. At this time, Yun attacked Rayan, but his partner managed to protect him. The guy instantly activated divine power. Yun made a sarcastic joke about how he ended up alone. The blonde boy replied that it was none of his business. The Viking immediately intervened and called them idiots. More than anything, he wanted them to die. Suddenly he clapped his hands, and water poured from the sky. It started to rain. Asura and Rayan stood with their backs to each other. The other players watched patiently and did not move. Vidar saw a male figure walking towards them. It seemed like some kind of deity. The Viking spoke first. He said that if he was one of the gods, then he shouldn't even waste his time on pathetic humans. His brother, Thor in person, appeared before him. The girls were immediately confused and had questions. One of them immediately thought about why one of the ancient gods could appear, especially so suddenly. The Viking also became curious about what he was doing in this place. Thor replied that it was a courtesy call sent by his father. He learned about his battle with the Monkey King, and his son came to visit his brother. Vidar replied that he saw no point in talking to him. Thor just laughed. Besides, in this game he was nothing more than just another player. Thor voiced his desire to talk. He laughed loudly and said that every time he saw him, he was ready to destroy him. The boys stood in the rain, unable to move, each of them waiting for what would happen next. All this continued until Asura intervened. Thor replied that he should not interfere in their conversation. Asura said that he knew perfectly well who was in front of him. The hero continued that he had disrupted their training. Vidar stared at them, and then asked him to stop. Rayan wanted to know how to communicate with his family. Thor replied that the boy had too high an opinion of himself and that he should know his place. Suddenly, Thor took out his hammer. He was instantly enveloped in divine energy. The Viking was surprised that the boy had provoked the god. Thor said people were lucky to be able to see him. They didn't care at all that he was a god. Asura understood that such deities were worth fearing. The guy remembered the moment associated with King Wukong. He plunged into a space where he could be alone with his consciousness. This time, something new awaited him. As soon as the door swung open, he saw before him a battle between a player and a true son of God. This made me feel uneasy. It was unclear where an ordinary person could get such strength from. Asura was excited. With this fight, he wanted to warm up. At this moment, a blow thundered behind the main character. Rayan immediately understood what was happening. Thor pronounced his name clearly and smiled maliciously. The boy knew that in front of him was the one who had defeated the king of macaques. He replied that he used his eyes well. Thor replied that it was most likely because he had defeated one god. Asura instantly became angry with him. Vidar realized that Thor would not leave a trace of the boy. He shouted at him to get out of here. The deity rushed towards him, and it screamed that it was too late to stop him. Asura instantly activated his power. It was unclear what to do next. The main character understood that he was not the only one in this game. Rayan quickly repelled the attack. Yun also joined the fight. He understood that such a smug god would not be difficult to finish off. A powerful uppercut landed right on the god's jaw. Thor stood his ground, but he never expected such a weakling to have such power. Shinnigan, at this time, took out his sword and rushed to attack. The deity screamed. The blonde boy looked at him with fiery eyes. A moment later, divine fire rushed forward, sweeping away everything in its path. For a moment, Shinnigan stopped. Yun fell to his knees. He had never seen anything like it before. Then he noticed that the guy was much more resilient than he thought. It was difficult for the boys to see if Thor was still alive. Shinnigan hoped that they had destroyed Thor. The main character looked at the guy carefully. Shinnigan decided that they couldn't find anyone stronger. Besides, he was a representative of the Osiris clan. However, it turned out that Thor survived. They never expected him to stay alive. The son of God immediately rushed forward. Yun shouted that they needed to prepare for a fight, as he was seriously angry. The main character cursed. At this time, the players who stood behind him finally became active and worried. The girl decisively replied that it was a matter of trust. Therefore, there was still hope that they would be able to get everything sorted out. Rayan decided that if he used this, he could stop him. The protagonist remembered what King Wukong had done. At this time, Vidar decided that he could not cope without divine help. The main character looked at the Viking. He was determined. The warrior was dissatisfied with the main character. It immediately seemed to him that interfering in the midst of a fight was too much. The man gritted his teeth. He had no use for weaklings like them. Wotan also said that he did not need help. He didn't need anyone else. It was a battle of brothers. After these words, he ordered them to get out of his way. First of all, he was ready to be the one who would kill Thor. Thor said that it was unforgivable to talk to his older brother like that. The Viking ordered him to be silent. Then he lunged forward. A hammer fell to the ground. Thor was pleased that he had regained control of the weapon. A second later, he screamed for him to finally die. Vidar tried to repel the attack with all his might. The light wave began to spread and destroy everything around. The main character managed to dodge. Asura tensed. The only way out in this situation is to intervene. Rayan said that if they got rid of everyone, it would become much easier. The Viking got angry. Suddenly a girl intervened. The protagonist looked closely at what was happening ahead. A fight broke out in front of him, and he was surprised that Aya's strength was so great. This time she decided she had had enough. At this time, Thor announced the purpose of his visit. It turned out that he wanted to convey important information to the Viking. Besides, the fact that he screwed up was extremely hard to forget. The deity announced that he would have to say goodbye to life. It was hard to find him in the labyrinth. The girl noted that she no longer wanted to fight further. The Viking thought that this was not accepted in their clan. The warrior rushed towards him. Most likely he would have succeeded in defeating him. A moment later, a fist moved towards him, and the guy only had time to curse. As soon as it became light, the warrior wondered who the girl was, who had fought so bravely the previous night. Most likely there had to be someone who could stop these two gods. It was unpleasant to admit defeat. After a while, Anubis appeared, accompanied by a girl who replied that the game was getting more and more interesting. The god of death wanted to know how his brother was doing. The green-haired girl replied that she was very surprised at how far he could go. The bearded man covered his face with his injured hand, and replied that the boy still had friends. Anubis assumed that someone had helped him. Moreover, everyone who participated in the fourth round was strictly volunteer. There was only one small thing left to do. They agreed that the Viking should have crossed paths with them at least once in the labyrinth. The only desire they had left was to simply finish him off once and for all. A decent plan had to be come up with, alone in the company of one of his faithful ravens. The wind seemed to whisper words that whoever wants to find him will certainly be able to find him in the labyrinth. Kayla wondered who they would have to fight in the next round and what would happen next. While the main character was engrossed in conversation with the girl, and Yoon was devouring dinner, Kayla wanted at least someone to hear her and pay attention to her words. Shinnigan joined Viking. He will most likely be hunted in the next round, just like he was in this one. Vidar replied that he would try to stay away from them. The blonde guy praised the Viking's desire to go into the labyrinth, but his arrogance was probably what should have gotten him killed. Death's ward sat peacefully on the couch and wanted to know what would have happened if she had not protected the others. The Viking shouted that no one should have interfered. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Asura looked up. It took him a few seconds to understand what was happening. It was pretty obvious that everyone would have their own goal. One of the youngest players said they were clearly hiding something. He hoped that Vidar's story would not end there. First of all, because the Supreme God himself is interested in this game. The brunette was surprised, as she thought that her ability was to recover on her own. But it turned out that now even they do not understand the essence of divine power. Most likely, the girl herself was able to stop Vidar and Thor. Besides, it was also about Shinigin. The guy was curious as to why Thor didn't recognize him. The blonde boy's eyes widened. Asura and the girl looked at him intently. Shinigin recognized Wukong when they first met him, and the meeting didn't bode well. The Viking just snorted. A second later, the air was pierced by the sound of thunderous laughter. Kayla and Yun were surprised. They didn't understand what was funny. It's no wonder he had a mask. He was probably hiding everything behind it. More than anything, Vidar didn't want their secrets to be revealed. Shinigin was very angry. The Viking caught his stern gaze and reminded him that there were about 35 hours left until the end of the 4th round. The guy wanted nothing more than for no one to bother him. The Viking said that now he could tell them himself. Shinigin replied that he didn't care. Now the Viking knew that they now knew everything. Rayan understood that before teaming up with someone, he needed to tell about himself. The blonde guy decided that all this would be pointless in the end. The guy turned to them and said that most likely, they were facing inevitable death. A day and a half passed after Shinigin left. During this time, they were able to focus on training. Shinigin decided that it would be better to prepare for training alone. Vidar did not reveal his secrets. All they could do was imagine it. Only Knight saved the guys from the 4th round. The youngest player thought they were very lucky. It seemed like they only had a few hours left together. I wondered why they would need to say anything in that case. Yun smiled and said he didn't need any explanation. He believed that now was the best time for a round. The girl decided that this was the last day they would spend time together. Besides, Rayan was just thinking about this game. This time, the fight for life was at stake. Even just spending the last few days together could solve something. Asura felt himself worrying about them. He looked down, needing a few seconds to think. The girl looked at him intently. She understood that they did not have much time. The Viking decided to remain silent. Then he said that tomorrow they would need someone who could help them. Rayan replied that it could have something to do with him. The Viking understood that this could all be because of the guy. It turned out they just needed someone to stand up for them. Besides, it's just a return of a debt. Vidar understood that the gods only wanted his death. The problem was that there were too many gods, and they were all inevitably united into pantheons. The most dangerous thing was that many of them, for some reason, were hampered by the existence of the main character. It was not difficult to guess that this whole game was conceived solely to entertain the gods. Still, the Supreme God had a goal: to execute the gods who rebelled against him. One of these was Wukong. Those deities who did not believe in a supreme creator had to be destroyed. After all, some gods had to despise others. God adds those creatures that he will test to see how worthy they are of this game. After all, if a human defeats the deity itself, something might happen that would disrupt the game. Rayan wanted to know why the game kills old gods and creates new ones. Vidar wanted to protect himself from the game, and some deities joined the god. Moreover, the participants had already met several of them. Thor confirmed that he will represent the next round, but he is chosen by a god, and the Minotaur in this case is just a curator. He joined in quite well for the 4th round. In past games, there have been situations where deities have voluntarily joined rounds as minigame hosts or participants, and Thor isn't the only god to join in the 4th round. The reason why the candidates don't fight each other in the 4th round is because they want the players to face the gods. Vidar bowed his head, his thoughts nothing more than guesses. Most likely the next day would show what would happen next. All that remained was to hope that Yun wouldn't do something stupid again. Moreover, the Viking knows very well who exactly from the Pantheon wanted him dead. They will likely continue to be tracked. The warrior replied that he did not want to put the other players in danger, and that he would not allow them to die tomorrow. Asura smiled to one side, very amused by his words. Yun walked up to Rayan and laughed. He didn't expect that there was anything human left in such a big guy. Asura thanked the Viking and said that they would prepare. The other players felt awkward, but they knew they could handle it. They had no other choice. They had to be prepared for anything, and survive at any cost. They were ready to meet each other. Maybe not on this side. There was very little time left until the 4th round. The boys exchanged glances. The players even managed to rest. Even Vidar looked less tense. Kayla and the younger player were also ready for a new round. After some time, Master Era appeared in front of them. He extended his hands to the participants and said that it was time for a new round. He became interested in which of the players was the bravest and ready to go first. The main character lowered his head. He needed time to think. The players prepared for what might await them next. With the dawn, everything was supposed to change. The master reminded the players of the rules for the next round. They would now be divided into groups of 3, and later, they would have to be transported to the labyrinth. Rayan and Aya were the first team. The second team consisted of Yun, Kayla, and Jai. Vidar and Ija ended up in third place, which the girl was extremely unhappy about. Vidar wasn't particularly happy with having such a partner either. Aya replied that she would like to join someone else. After some time, the master announced the participants of the fourth team. It seemed like Shinigami already had an idea who he would be going through this level with. The last thing he wanted was to waste time. The master said that he should not go forward. Then he ceremoniously announced the start of the round. It was necessary to remember what happened last night. It will be difficult to find each other in the labyrinth. Rayan said that they would meet on the other side. Several players moved forward. A moment later, the next team moved forward. Shinigami couldn't see these faces. Rayan looked at the participants who had disappeared behind a white veil. Thus began the next round of the God game. The protagonist's eyes lit up. Instantly, he was overcome with concern for the girl. She replied that everything was fine. The guy took her word for it. The entrance to the labyrinth appeared before them. It seemed to them that the world they knew would never be the same, and this place did not look very friendly. Aya replied that they had 4 days to find a way out. She turned to Asura and asked him if they could make it through this round to the end and stay alive. Rayan also hoped that he would manage to remain safe and sound. They had to continue fighting for their lives. However, the protagonist saw another way. He needed a little time to think. Immediately, he activated divine power. It was the gift of omniscience that could help him make the right choice. He was surprised. Several doors appeared before him, but his consciousness focused on only one. Rayan didn't know what awaited him next. If they follow the same path, there is a chance of running into trouble. Although this was the easiest and fastest way, still, something made him wary. It seemed to him that there was someone ahead. He felt danger with all his gut. Ahead, he saw a male figure. The silhouette was exactly like Shinigan's, but before them appeared the Olympian god, Hermes, in person. Aya wanted to know what exactly the deity wanted to do. Asura replied that Enyo had explained the rules of this round. However, the longer they are in the labyrinth, the more monsters they will encounter. After all, the goal of this round is to find the exit as quickly as possible. If they choose the easiest path, there is a chance that they will encounter the supreme god. Then, it is quite possible that they will take the longest path, which is on the other side of the exit. Omniscience can't see into such a distant future. Rayan didn't know what was behind the trap. The girl replied that it would be better for them to choose a path that they could walk together. Moreover, she perfectly recognized the face of the one in front of her. Rayan replied that he wanted to fight the most important god. The guy smiled slightly. He was ready to destroy anyone. The guy took a few steps. Hermes was still sitting in place. He was carefully studying the guys who were standing right in front of him. After a while, he thought that he should say hello. The guy replied that he could start the game, then introduced himself. He explained that he was a divine messenger from Olympus. The guy and the girl introduced themselves in response. Hermes saw the fight in the third round. He had to admit that he was the most interesting of them all. What he wanted to know most was what they were doing in this very place. Then the guy asked where they were rushing to. The fourth round took place in a huge labyrinth, which could take a very long time to navigate. The deity then replied that they had added minigames to make the task easier. They needed to win this game and learn about the shortcut that would guarantee them the exit. If they lose, death awaits them. This time, one of the games was supposed to be tag. During the rounds, they would be divided into hunters and runners. To win, the hunter must tag every team member before time runs out. If you lose, the roles may reverse, and the runners may become the hunters. The game continues until a winner emerges. To mark someone, he simply needs to hit the mark on the target's back or chest. Hermes was interested in whether he had any questions. Did this mean that in order to win, he needed to mark Rayan? But in this case, it was only him who needed to be marked. Hermes grinned. He walked towards them. Then he said that it would be very difficult for them. He beckoned to them with his fingers and said that he would show them the place where they would play next. A tunnel appeared in front of them. It was a huge forest. Such a large space could not fit into the labyrinth. She did not understand how this was possible. It was a god's game. The answer was inevitable. They used spatial manipulation to create rooms for their games, but they could only see this forest until someone entered the room. It might look as if they were actually in a small room, only a few meters long and wide. He had one last question. He needed to know why he became the curator of the fourth round. Hermes was perplexed. A second later, a smile appeared on his face. He immediately realized that Vidar had told him what was happening. He wondered how it was possible that the Viking had told him everything. The girl replied that he should win before making advances towards her. Rayan was ready to talk about what to do next. There was no point in him revealing secrets to a couple of mortals. Then he looked up and said that he had forgotten something. 2 players in the god game would definitely not be enough to catch him. They united with those who came to them. Most likely he knew one of them. He didn't understand why everything was taking so long. 2 bad guys appeared in front of him. One of them was wearing a striped suit. He ordered him to start the game as soon as possible. Aya wanted to understand if the main character knew the guys who were ahead. Rayan replied that he only knew one of them. He remembered a guy he had met once. Now he looked a little different. He saw this guy in his memories. They paused for a second, trying to figure out what the player who appeared in front of them would do. The guy turned to the main character. He was surprised that he remembered so little information. Asura needed a couple of seconds. He became worried. It turned out that the guy in front of him was glad to see the main character. The guys sealed their greeting with a handshake. They were lucky to be allies in this round. The guy with green hair noted that he didn't really look like a person who had friends. The guy with a scar on his face began to remember their meeting in detail. Hermes watched this touching meeting. He attracted their attention by throwing a couple of phrases in their direction. He said they would have plenty of time to catch up. However, to do this, you will need to achieve victory. Asura wanted to know what ideas they had to get through this round. It seemed like there was a half-hour timer for each round. This time was very short. It was impossible to get through such a large labyrinth. It was necessary to split into groups of 2. Those who found God should inform the others so that they could come to the rescue. The guy turned to the main character, hoping that he would cope with this task. Asura nodded. The guys began to move away. They had a lot to discuss. Suddenly, they both activated their power and decided that they would finish off the god no matter what. Aya replied that they had very powerful energy. Rayan thought that if it weren't for him, the daimyo's warriors could have turned him into a slave. Aya wanted to know who he was and why Rayan was so thoughtful. The hero replied that this guy saved him when the daimyo's warriors captured his sister. It was many years ago. Rayan didn't want to go into details. The girl got the impression that he needed to speak out. Hermes approached the players and said that they had spent too much time in the labyrinth. It looked like they would have a hard time finding the exit. Asura shouted that he didn't know what was going on here and where the exit was. God looked at him carefully. He then replied that the hunters were nearby, so they needed to find a safe place. He then said that he could help them as he knew the game and the place very well. In addition, he was involved in the creation of this game. Besides, he won't allow himself to be caught and killed. No one could keep up with him, and that is what made him famous. A moment later, Hermes turned to Hera, who was armed. The blaster had been taken over by divine power. The girl could no longer rely on the weapon. Hermes took a few steps. Then he laughed. He perceived everything that was happening as fun. Rayan thought about how his shoes were creating support in the air. The deity landed, and with a smug grin replied that their team was impressive. They cooperated in a split second. It took more than that to catch him. The girl was puzzled. She didn't know what to do or how to proceed further. She didn't want to let go of the blaster. Hermes noticed another weapon in her hands. Aya immediately attacked the god. Hermes was amused. He understood that there was no bullet that could be faster than him. Suddenly, a light illuminated the labyrinth. The girl gave the order. God dodged the bullet with lightning speed, and he landed softly on a tree, admiring the accuracy of his opponent's aim. A moment later, she fired several blasts of light, and the bullets began to fly towards Hermes. The main character stood nearby and watched what was happening. Hermes was curious about how she was able to control the direction of the bullets with the help of weapons, and increase their speed. The bullets were part of the girl's energy, so it was not difficult for her to control the charges. The deity dodged the attack again. His hands caught on a tree. Surprisingly, not a single bullet could even touch him. The girl fired another volley. Asura had never seen such agility and strength before. He wanted to know what would happen next, and what needs to be done in order to catch God. At this time, Hermes landed on a tree. A few more bullets followed him. He had to move even more quickly. As soon as he rose up, he saw the labyrinth from a bird's eye view. Hermes understood that if he stopped moving, Hera's bullets would definitely catch him. He needed to quickly move into space. Hermes smiled. The protagonist was puzzled. Hermes moved faster and faster. Catching such a creature would be a real problem. The deity maneuvered between the bullets. The girl was not happy with this and swore. Then she pointed the blaster at Hermes. A second later, shots from both blasters were already flying in his direction. One of the bullets almost managed to hit him. The game participant was surprised. Hermes just smiled smugly. All he had to do was grab the girl. He was distracted by a blow that he did not notice. This was the main character. He could not allow his ally to be captured. Rayan got angry. Hermes felt blood begin to run down his cheek. He should have remembered about this guy, but he got distracted because of the girl, before no one could even hurt him. But not this time. Moreover, Hermes remembered that the guy in front of him had omniscience, which was doubly dangerous. He understood what this could lead to, and said that he did not want to repeat Wukong's fate. Hermes became active again and said that he would continue to move even faster. He couldn't let some pathetic players catch him. Divine powers and weak touches did not count. They had to directly touch his body. The fight began to resemble a game of tag. Rayan thought that he didn't have such a mark. Hermes smiled and said that they could touch any part of his body. Now the deity wanted to fight with the main character. Rayan will hit the place where he will be. The power of omniscience would allow him to be one step ahead. That's why he doesn't lag behind. It was foolish to think that a mortal could leave a god behind. All this would look very stupid. Hermes was always the fastest. Now he needed to defeat not just a mortal, but a player with abilities. Rayan replied that even the future of God is predetermined. Hermes noticed that something had changed around him. Rayan turned around. From birth, he was one of the best Olympians. Asura immediately realized that he was the best in both body and spirit. The protagonist tried to capture the deity. It didn't matter how far into the future he could see, if his body and mind are not fast enough. At that moment, an explosion thundered. The main character was thrown far back. Blood was streaming down Rayan's face. He noticed that Hermes had dealt with his power too quickly, something that had never happened before. Rayan saw a path to opportunity, which meant he had a chance to hit Hermes. He understood that he would not be able to ignore the future and current events. Hermes was very fast. His consciousness and mind were on a completely different level. This meant that he could adapt to the new future much faster than he could. This was his undoubted advantage. He was very curious about who could outsmart him. The next moment, 2 blasters were aimed at Hermes. Aya held the gun tightly in her hands, then fired. Hermes' lips spread into a smile. The girl clenched her teeth. She was angry at Hermes. He grabbed her hands and asked her why she was angry with him. After all, without his notorious speed, he would not have become a god. The girl freed her wrists from his hands. The next moment, he punched her in the chest with such force that blood flowed from her mouth. The girl's body flew to the side. Hermes was pleased that he dealt with her so quickly. She must have felt his true strength and power. She expected to go through several rounds with the guys. Hermes hesitated. A few seconds passed before the player pounced on Hermes. Hermes managed to dodge thanks to his speed. The deity objected. The guy fell to his knees and said he was too fast. He called over a green-haired guy named Jack. Hermes managed to dodge this time too. The guy waved back, and he said that he would definitely cope with it. The deity could not grasp his battle strategy. Suddenly, it was as if electricity had struck him. Jack immediately realized that this was the influence of divine energy. It was an old trick he had been using. Hermes would have recognized this power anywhere. Besides, he remembered the god of wine and entertainment. Jack's sponsor was the ancient Greek deity Dionysus, who was also an Olympian and could fight Hermes. The guy realized that they couldn't cope without a divine sponsor. He never liked this childish game. He firmly voiced his intention to put an end to it. He never liked this game. Hermes cursed, and then he jumped up from his seat. First of all, he didn't want the players to beat him. Jack was surprised by the deity's speed and how deftly he dealt with the power of his divine sponsor. Jack's partner quickly distracted him and rushed towards him. Then he shouted that weak gods did not deserve a place in this game. Hermes immediately showed him all his speed. The partner began to think about how to catch him. Jack replied that he couldn't handle such a clever god alone. The guy let him go. Jack agreed with him. Then he said that he was counting on his partner. Rayan chose him as his partner. He looked at the girl and asked how she was able to come to her senses after one blow. He felt sorry for the girl. She bowed and said that she would never allow someone so weak to be near her. She hoped she could stay alive this round. The guy shouted that she should pull herself together and show what she was capable of. There remained hope that he could do more than just observe what was happening. Rayan said they were much more powerful than he expected. The girl thought that everything she had learned during the game turned out to be not so effective in the fight against the gods. After some time, Asura activated the power of omniscience. The participant in the round also moved her consciousness to a special place. Tears flowed down her cheeks. She understood that she needed to continue to fight further. Shinigin and Rayan looked at her carefully. At this time, Jack's partner saw that the team was distracted. This was that very moment. Moreover, he had not seen someone equal to him in strength for a long time. In addition, it could unlock access to a new level of sponsor power. After so many battles and training, he simply had to choose the right path. It looks like he can't do without a weapon this time. Immediately, she raised the blasters and loaded them. She needed more divine power. The next moment, something like a grenade launcher appeared in her hands. It was a piercer of eternity. All she had to do was charge it. A couple of seconds later, she fired. The blow was so strong that it was unlikely that anyone would have survived. Aya took aim again, and she fired. She felt omnipotent. Hermes tensed, and he started running. He was pleased that he had dodged the girl's new weapon, the only one who could even slightly fight him in speed. Hermes noticed that she had become stronger. The enemy did not give up. She took aim again, trying to hit the deity. The deity landed on the earth. His body did a somersault in space, then a somersault. Finally, his perfect body jumped over another tree, and he threw himself down to the ground, dodging the girl's bullets. Hermes was worried that he was unable to escape pursuit. The Olympian once again overcame the same trajectory. Suddenly, Jack appeared in front of him. Hermes did not immediately understand who was standing in front of him. Jack pressed the button and a mad laugh echoed through the space. Hermes was able to dodge this time too. It looks like the bombs were hard to see. Jack's partner was pleased that he had caught the enemy off guard. The girl slid down and found herself unconscious. Hermes lost his balance and fell towards the ground. It looks like he got caught in a trap when he got distracted by the girl. Rayan was pleased that he managed to catch him. The hero found himself next to Hermes. It seems that even he is tired of this fight with mortals. Jack's partner seemed to appear out of nowhere. He saw that Rayan was moving towards Hermes. The Olympian was angry that he had been caught so stupidly. He remembered the moment when he first set out on his path, back in his early childhood. Then Zeus himself gave him special shoes that increased his speed. His joy knew no bounds then. If it weren't for this gift, he wouldn't be the best in the pantheon. Hermes managed to keep his balance. Immediately, the gift of omniscience awakened within the protagonist, and it turned out that Hermes' ability to control speed could change future scenarios. He needed to defeat the enemy. Suddenly, Asura was hit by a shot. Jack's partner was scared. He didn't see Hermes anywhere. Hermes shouted to the boys that the enemy was above. A second later, he was picking up speed again, moving towards Jack. Hermes landed with such speed that the earth shook. One more jump and the deity appeared next to Jack's partner. The guy was confused. It was necessary to stop him somehow. Hermes did not give up, even when time is up. With the last second of the timer ticking down, he pierced the guy with a spear. He was unlucky, unlike Hermes, who was supported by the supreme god of his pantheon. The Olympian smiled and said he would be glad to see him in the next round, and finish him off once again.